YouTubers and, let's be honest, grifters in any fandom would.
So the first thing I'm worried about is that it gives some of these YouTube grifters, these tourists that have been, visiting our fandom just to shit on some of the projects, it adds more fuel to their fire that they're trying to burn about how, American Godzilla sucks, or there's only 3 Toho movies worth watching.
There are a lot of grifters around right now, and they do not care about the franchise, no matter what they say.
Grifters.
YouTube grifters, these tourists.
There are a lot of grifters.
Grifters.
Hey everyone, how's it going? So yeah, definitely encountering what could definitely be said to be a grifter today. And yes, it is an eponymous bread tuber. So that's fun. I don't think there's any other bread tubers, or at least like big bread tubers, and I don't think there's any, I think their terms like crumb tubers or something. I don't think there's any crumb tubers who have done too much in the way of talking about Godzilla. How's it going, Alice? And hello, Tokupunk as well. How's it going? And if you're hearing anything in the background, it's literally just because we're doing some cleaning around the house. So someone else in the family is downstairs vacuuming. So that's always fun. But what I'm also going to be trying to do in the meantime here is I'm going to see if one of the kaiju games I have that's kind of less intensive can actually launch. And how's it going, Brandon? I wouldn't really consider Donald Trump to be a director, but no one loves Godzilla like I do. If we had to fight Godzilla, we'd build a giant wall and we'd be able to keep all the kaiju out, you understand? And damn, I got 5 people in here. So that's fun. What I'm going to be doing is I'm actually going to keep, I'll keep the volume down to 10 each for everything. As well as also, it's been a little bit of time since I actually was able to capture any footage for the game. So this is going to be fun, hopefully. Okay. So I'm going to be looking at everything from another screen. So anyone let me know at least how things look on this end here for the stream, because if it doesn't seem like there's anything going on screen, just let me know, because I want to see if it's going to show anything at all. Which, at least from what I can tell, it doesn't look like it's actually working on stream, which is annoying. Or at least, that's weird, because at least it's showing that's playing on my end, or is it just super laggy on the other end? It's weird. I'll just keep monitoring and see how it goes. So we're actually gonna be playing a little bit of Exidio. So I know I did talk about the stream in the in at least the Exidio Discord, so they'll be able to look at this, and Tokubook's part of it. But at the moment right now, you have 2 kaiju. You have Exidio himself, and then you have the Stone Titan. And right now you have access to, for skins wise, you have Fel Exidio, Hella Exidio, Megadon, which is really fun, and then you have Exidio Plus, or Goji Exidio, Giga Exidio, or almost like an EX version, like EX Exidio, Tuxedio, which gives him obviously tuxedo colors, Pink Exidio, and there's regular Exidio. I think in terms of the ones I usually liked using, at least back when they first started, it was the what's it called? This one, Fel Exidio. But the Stone Titan, I have no context for, because I have not looked at anything since then. And look at that. That's funny. If that's, I hope that the stream's actually catching that. So I just swapped between Exidio and the Stone Titan so quickly that it looks like I just glitched it. And it looks like, actually, unfortunately, it's still not working. So what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to stop screen sharing it this way, and I'm just going to share the screen and see if it works that way. So that might actually just work better. Let's see. So, okay. So at least that glitch went away. So back out. Sandbox. Fell. And maps. So there's a few different maps now, because originally it was just the Polygon City map was the one that you could use. And then there was the Kaijurano and then Rio de Janeiro, which is another one you could use. So at least it was 2 maps, and now they've added a new one. So look at that. Turn off anything here. Evening. Let's do day. God mode, no. At the moment, it still says that there's nothing showing up. Screen looks frozen to me. Okay. That's unfortunate then. Still at work on a short break while catching the start of this. I'll be here full time later this tonight. Okay, got you. If the stream's still frozen, then I think what we can do at least then is I'm probably not going to be able to actually stream the gameplay then. That's unfortunate. So quit to main menu. And yeah, it might just be taking up too much, unfortunately. Let me stop the screen share there. Yeah, they just bring me back. Yeah, that's annoying. That's unfortunate. Hello, I'm here. Hello there, Federico. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. That's kind of annoying. I wish that actually it worked out fine, because it looks like, at least from my end, it was playing fine, but it looked like completely outside of on the streaming end, it just was completely shitting the bed, which is unfortunate. It says went out, but if someone says something unfathomably stupid, then let me know. Oh, what's it called? I'll definitely let you know. But okay. Oh well. But at least the good thing now is that what's wrong with BreadTubers, Vosh, and Destiny don't count. Well, Destiny, definitely. If we're talking about what's it called? If we're talking about Destiny's current status, he doesn't consider himself like a BreadTuber at all, and considers himself center left and doesn't associate at all with any progressive people. Vosh is just an easy low hanging fruit target. We could also bring up people like Keffels, easy low hanging fruit. FD Signifier, also easy low hanging fruit. Mike from PA. I'd say, like, generally, if someone was to ask like what the major problem with a lot of these people are, it's that in most cases they do little to no canvassing, and generally their entire business model is them talking about these problems instead of actually doing significant change in their communities. Unlike other people, like I'd say, like, even though I don't agree with everything he says, at least Destiny's done like a considerable amount of canvassing events. And the other thing too is that there's just a general lack of consistency. I would say, like, what's that one person's name? Frogan, with some of the stuff that's been going on with them, and having like weird spats with I think it's Ludwig or something, which I don't really pay attention to many people, but the biggest issue I'd say is that whenever any of them like talk about media, it's always like super heavily biased, or there's so much information that's taken out of context that's unbelievably disingenuous. And in this case, at least I remember watching this a while ago, this video, even though it's painted as a Godzilla video, because obviously that's what's on the thumbnail, it has essentially little to do actually with Godzilla overall. But that would be like my general feelings about things. What kind of harness does make the guy that you're going to be talking about? So yeah, we can actually just sort of get into it then, shall we? Alrighty. Streamception, gentlemen and ladies. So It's Big Joe's channel, 7.9K, and does a little bit of stuff on media, a little bit of stuff on just politics, but it's not like a complete total media channel, and obviously definitely not a kaiju channel, because that's the only, I think, Godzilla video that's actually on the channel. So that's essentially what you're getting into with all of this. And the video is about 25 minutes, so we'll do it. Even though I don't think he's actually on the stream right now, we'll do a Godzilla knot, and we'll do this on speed. I think I'll probably do like about, let's just say we'll go at about 1.5 times speed.
This video is sponsored by Nebula, the streaming service with me on it. When I was a kid, Godzilla existed as this big, weird lizard from Japan. I didn't watch his movies, but the general consensus was that it was iconic, goofy cinema. He was campy and ridiculous and fun. Because of this, the first Godzilla film, the one from 1954, always became kind of a fun factoid. Did you know it was actually really dark? Did you know that it took itself seriously? When this information was exchanged, it always came with one bit of interpretation, that before he was bastardized through endless sequels, Godzilla was a metaphor for the atomic bomb. That's true.
Let's go back there, actually, because that's interesting. I'm probably also I'm gonna up the volume just a tiny bit. That's better.
This video is sponsored by Nebula, the streaming service.
We get it. You're on Nebula.
When I was a kid, Godzilla existed as this big, weird lizard from Japan. I didn't watch his movies, but the general...
What's it called? So obviously the guy's not a fan. He literally just says he doesn't watch the movies. You're literally just repeating what cringe incels say. Okay. Like, that has no bearing on whether any of the points given are right or wrong.
General consensus was that it was iconic, goofy cinema. He was campy and ridiculous and fun. Because of this, the first Godzilla film, the one from 1954, always became kind of a fun factoid. Did you know it was actually really dark? Did you know that it took itself seriously? When this information was exchanged, it always came with one bit of interpretation, that before he was bastardized through endless sequels, Godzilla was a metaphor for the atomic bomb. That's true. I mean...
That's kind of always been Godzilla's thing, but okay. Not to mention the fact that, like, almost always anytime, and we've been seeing this across, like, all the videos that we mentioned, that they say, like, after all the sequels, and they're almost always just showing Showa footage instead of, like, even any of the Heisei or the Millennium footage, even though most of these people grew up either at the tail end of the Heisei series or during the Millennium era.
Obviously, that's true. Godzilla in that movie is a direct consequence of nuclear testing. He is radioactive, he destroys Japan. He is explicitly compared to the bomb. There's no denying it. That being said, though, I want to look here at one scene toward the beginning of the film. A woman sits on a train talking about Godzilla, and she says this: I just barely got out of Hiroshima, and now I have to deal with Godzilla? It's an iconic line, funny and sad. The bomb here is not imagined as horrific or terrifying, but almost as an inconvenience, an irritating burden, which must be lived with and thought about.
Not really. Like, that's not at all. Like, that's not even close to, like, what that line's talking about. It's more just talking about the fact that, yeah, this is terrifying, and it's terrifying because it's happening again. It's not like it's a mundanity.
This scene troubles our analysis, doesn't it? If Godzilla is the bomb, if that is what he is exclusively meant to represent, then what the hell is the literal bomb doing here? What is the point of having both when they are supposed to be one in the same? Why?
Because there could be multiple bombs, and Godzilla was a way to rationalize the trauma of the bombs, but also explain how that horror could probably happen again. What's up, Joe Schmo? You need Godzilla Series Season 3? I could live without it. I know a few people in chat probably would love to see a Season 3.
I reinvent what is already right there in the movie staring at us. Anyway, in this video, I want to talk about what Godzilla is, what he means, and why we need him, even though the bomb already dropped. Between 1979 and 1982, Jenny Halser produced a series called Inflammatory Essays. The essays, printed on colored paper and placed on a massive wall, are very strange and all over the place. One of them is a justification for an extremely punitive justice system. Let's actually just read them for the hell of it. A cruel but ancient law demands an eye for an eye. Murder must be answered by execution. Only God has the right to take a life, and when someone breaks this law, he will be punished. Justice must come swiftly. It doesn't help anyone to stall. The victims' families cry out for satisfaction.
The community begs for protection, and the departed craves vengeance so he can arrest the killer. Knew in advance there was no excuse for his act. Truly, he has taken his own life. He, not society, is responsible for his fate. He alone stands guilty and damned.
A cruel but ancient law demands
Oh.
an eye for an eye. One of them is about the goodness of freedom and the end of authority. One of them is about the torture.
Jeez, slow down.
Ancient law demands an eye for an eye. One of them is about the
I guess I'll just have to slow down the footage then. Okay.
ancient law demands an eye for an eye. One of them.
Freedom, is it? You're so scared you want to lock up everybody. Are they mad dogs? Are they out to kill? Maybe yes. Is order the solution? Definitely no. What caused this situation? Lack of freedom? What happens now? Let people fulfill their needs. Is freedom constructive or is it destructive? The answer is obvious. Free people are good, productive people. Is liberation dangerous? Only when overdue. People aren't born rabid or berserk. When you punish and shame, you cause what you dread. What to do? Let it explode. Run with it. Don't control or manipulate. Make amends.
Them is about the goodness of freedom and the end.
So, at least we're going to be going, it looks like, on one of the famous little tangents. So, because right here, he's going to be like...
Anyway, in this video, I want to talk about what Godzilla is, what he means, and why we need him, even though the bomb already dropped.
So that's essentially what he's saying. Even though, like, almost all interpretations of Godzilla wasn't that the bomb isn't a representation of just the bomb, but also a representation that the terror of the bomb could happen again, which kind of makes the entire point of this video meaningless, but okay.
Between 1979 and 1982, Jenny Holzer produced a series called Inflammatory Essays. The essays, printed on colored paper and placed on a massive wall, are very strange and all over the place. One of them is a justification for an extremely punitive justice system. A cruel but ancient law demands an eye for an eye. One of them is about the goodness of freedom and the end of authority. One of them is about the torture of looking at sexy girls. One is a kind of authority.
Let's see if I...
goodness of freedom and the end of authority. One of them is about...
I'm just waiting so I don't say something on stream that's gonna get me absolutely destroyed. Yeah, nope, I'm not reading that. Okay.
about the torture of looking at sexy girls. One is a kind of authoritarian, fascist-adjacent manifesto. Because there is no God, someone must take responsibility for men. A charismatic leader is imperative. He can subordinate the small wills to a great one. He merits absolute loyalty. He demands absolute devotion. He is the only hope. There is something obviously prescient about this piece. After all, walls like these dominate our lives. Endless sequences of outrage and anger, extreme beliefs placed next to each other, boosted by algorithms that encourage us to keep looking. This is Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, the structure of modern discourse, the shape of the world. Looking at inflammatory essays, it's impossible to avoid thinking about the role of its author. Jenny Holzer must like some of these essays more than other ones, right? On one hand, she is not, to my knowledge, very interested in the idea of a charismatic totalitarian leader who will submit our wills to his own. I doubt she's super into the death penalty or thinks snakes are evil. On the other hand, I want to believe she is opposed to the amount of material inequality in this world, affronted by the way the homeless are treated, disgusted by a society of voyeurism and tragedy seeking. We believe certain things, and we want the wall to believe those things too, but it doesn't. Everything about this work pushes us away, defers the possibility of its own meaning. The essays contradict each.
So I'm just gonna, I want to stop right there because I want to get to this point later. Because, at least, let's go back.
Here. What is the point of having both when they are supposed to be one in the same? Why reinvent what is already right there in the movie staring at us? Anyway, in this video, I want to talk about what Godzilla is, what he means, and why we need him, even though the bomb already dropped.
So right there, at least 2 minutes so far, and pretty much nothing that's been said has anything to do with relating to the text of Godzilla. So we're in for a fun one.
Contradict each other, believe opposite things. There is no greater weight put on any particular essay, no indication that Holzer agrees with some and disagrees with others. Even the name of the piece is almost ridiculing us. You want to discover some purpose, you want to know the point of this art? Well, I'm telling you, the purpose is to inflame, to make you mad. It is easy to imagine the end of the world happening through an absence, an occurrence after which nothing remains. But to look at this piece is to see another possibility, a world with no substance, not because nothing is there, but because everything is. Every idea that could be had, every claim a person could make. This series of essays represents the point at which there is no thread left to follow, no meaning left to hold. There is too much, and none of it tells us anything. The atom bomb was a decision. People stood around in rooms, wore lab coats, performed tests, all because the American government under Harry Truman and FDR decided they wanted to kill a bunch of Japanese civilians in the most horrifying way possible. This is true about
That's not
Godzilla.
accurate.
He's here now, terrorizing Japan because of a bureaucracy, because of the state and its nuclear testing. He is what we are asking for when we ask for the bomb. He is the outcome of war and the technology we use to fight war. The thing that happens when the world is broken and keeps getting more broken. But at the same time, Godzilla is an old guy, like really old. Not to blow your mind, but he is literally a dinosaur from the Jurassic era. And what's more, he's been around in Japanese culture for a long time. As this guy toward the beginning of the movie says,
What do you mean by not accurate? Let's go back to what he just said.
terrorizing Japanese, performed tests, all because the American government under Harry Truman and FDR decided they wanted to kill a bunch of Japanese civilians in the most horrifying way possible. This is true.
So let's we can go through any number of videos about the quibbling about the atomic bomb and what its use was for. So, I mean, if we want to, we can derail that completely all the way. But let's just talk about that for no other reason that they literally just wanted to commit a war crime. That's essentially what you're saying, is that it's true that the only thing that the atomic bomb was used for was just to commit a war crime.
It's been nearly 80 years since President Harry Truman made the decision to drop atomic bombs on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August 1945. To this day, people still question whether it was moral or even necessary, believing that the war could have been ended some other way. However, if Truman ever regretted the decision, he kept those feelings to himself. In public statements, private writings, and private conversations, he consistently maintained that it was the right thing to do. "I have no regrets," he wrote in 1963, 18 years after the bombings, "and under the same circumstances, I would do it again." To some, this might sound callous. The initial explosion in Hiroshima on August 6th produced anywhere from 60,000 to 140,000 fatalities, and by the end of the year, thousands more died from injuries. Most of these were civilians. Fatalities from the Nagasaki blast on August 9th were anywhere from 20,000 to 60,000, and by the end of the year, total fatalities may have been as high as 80,000. Only 150 were military personnel. Many initial survivors later suffered agonizing fates from acute radiation poisoning.
We literally almost always speed up these videos. If you want me to stop, you can tell me to stop.
And many of those who didn't were still left maimed and burned. Photos and videos have preserved these grisly results and much more. By 1963, when Truman made his statement, he was well aware of most of these details. For each bombing, he learned the high fatality count as early as the following day. Yet, in light of the Nagasaki bombing, he was prepared to drop a third bomb if needed. The military had already selected the target. Some military personnel even believed it would take 5 bombs in all. The military was ready, as was Truman. Quote, "We shall continue to use it until we completely destroy Japan's power to make war," Truman said in a statement after the second bomb was dropped. "Only a Japanese surrender will stop us." A third bomb wasn't needed. On August 15th, 6 days after the Nagasaki bombing, the Japanese emperor surrendered. This is what the Allies had been waiting for. By the time Truman took office in April 1945, there was no question in the minds of the American or the Japanese government that Japan couldn't win the war. There was only a question of when or if they'd surrender. Truman had 4 options. 1. Continue conventional bombings of Japanese cities. 2. Invade Japan with ground troops. 3. Demonstrate the atomic bomb on an uninhabited island. And 4. Use it on an inhabited city. More conventional bombing likely wouldn't deter the Japanese. The Americans had been strategically bombing Japan since June 1944, with civilian fatalities estimated at 250,000 at the low end and on the high end 900,000. The March 10th, 1945 firebombing of Tokyo alone produced up to 90,000 fatalities. A ground invasion would likely produce the same results, except with the additional cost of American lives. On Iwo Jima and Okinawa, the Americans had already been met with brutal resistance. Truman had every reason to believe the Japanese were committed to fighting for their emperor to the last man and woman and child. Some even believed that either of these 2 options would result in the extinction of the population of Japan, as city after city and town after town they would refuse to surrender. The death toll of any given battle made no difference to the Japanese, so the United States needed shock value. The government hoped that a demonstration of the raw and inconceivable power in a single atomic bomb would be enough to bring the Japanese government to its knees. Therefore, option 3 was to demonstrate the bomb's destructive power by using it on an uninhabited island. This could potentially bring an end to the war without further casualties, American or Japanese. However, this likely wouldn't be enough. Without massive fatalities and decimation, there simply wouldn't be enough of a shock. Even worse was the possibility that the United States would announce an island and a date for the bombing. And with the whole world watching, the bomb would be a dud. It's likely the Japanese would only be encouraged to fight even harder, and the United States would look very weak in front of their other international neighbors. Therefore, the only viable option was dropping the bomb on a populated city. Just because Truman never regretted the decision doesn't mean it was easy. On April 12th, the day of Roosevelt's death and the day Truman took office, he was told briefly about a new super-destructive weapon, but it was only 2 weeks later, on the 25th, that he actually learned the details. In July, the Trinity test of the first atomic bomb was a success. Truman learned of this a few days later while attending the Potsdam Conference in Germany. That night, he wrote in his diary, "We have discovered the most terrible bomb in the history of the world. It may be the fire destruction prophesied in the Euphrates Valley era after Noah and his fabulous ark. This weapon is to be used against Japan between now and August 10th. I have told the Secretary of War, Mr. Stimson, to use it so that military objectives and soldiers and sailors are the target, and not women and children. And even if the Japs are savages, ruthless, merciless, and fanatic, we as the leader of the world for the common welfare cannot drop that terrible bomb on the old capital or the new. He and I are in accord. The target will be a purely military one, and we will issue a warning statement asking the Japs to surrender and save lives. I'm sure they will not do that, but we will have to give them the chance. It is certainly a good thing for the world that Hitler's crowd or Stalin's did not discover this atomic bomb. It seems to be the most terrible thing ever discovered, but it can be made the most useful." The first bomb was dropped on August 6th, a little less than 4 months after Truman began his presidency. Despite his initial desire that the weapon would only hit military targets, the fatalities were mostly women, children, and civilian men. Truman released a televised and radio statement again demanding unconditional surrender, or else more bombs would be dropped. Nagasaki was bombed on August 9th. 6 days later, the Japanese announced their surrender. While it's generally believed that Truman would have dropped a third bomb if necessary, he was certainly beginning to feel conflicted. On August 10th, the day after Nagasaki was bombed, he met with his cabinet. Secretary of Commerce Henry Wallace recalled Truman receiving in-depth reports and photographs from the Hiroshima bombing, which shook him. Wallace wrote about the cabinet meeting in his diary. Truman said he had given orders to stop atomic bombing. He said the thought of wiping out another 100,000 people was too horrible. He didn't like the idea of killing, as he said, all those kids. More specifically, Truman had ordered that no more bombs be dropped without his express order. Later, when defending his usage of the bomb, Truman never brought up this potential doubt. As the Japanese ultimately surrendered on the 15th, it can't be known for sure if Truman would have ordered a third bombing. However, despite his initial reservations, it seemed that between the Nagasaki bombing and the surrender, he had once again resolved to use it. On August 12th, he replied to a letter written by a Protestant clergyman. The clergyman, Samuel McCree Cavert, urged Truman to cease the bombing. Truman responded, quote, "The only language they seem to understand is the one we have been using."
So Japan was going to surrender, but the US either ignored it or didn't get there in time. So history. Truman didn't want to do it. Why did it? Because it was war. Like, it's really clear that it was never going to be as cut and dry as like do or don't do it. Because it's either
You ever heard of
drop that
Lincoln?
bomb
He was
or continue the bombings, which clearly have not been working as well as they're intending it to, or Operation Downfall, which probably would have done even worse in terms of casualties, especially for the Allied side.
General,
But let's look at surrender.
War criminal, and person in the wrong place at the wrong time, or to carry out the disastrous charge that would forever have his name attached to it at Gettysburg. Post-war, there was a fascination in the U.S. over the defeat there. And, as you can imagine, Pickett was often asked what he thought was the cause of this huge defeat. But whenever asked, his reply was always the same. I think the Yankees had something to do with it. Let's talk about Japan. So if you know one thing about the Japanese in World War II, it's their reputation to not give up. From the individual, to the unit, to the government, holding out and preferring death to giving up. So it's kind of weird they gave up, right? Like, really, you could make an argument Germany held out longer and more in line with the stereotypical Japanese warrior spirit than Japan itself did. Japan even got like a semi-conditional surrender and peacefully welcomed an occupation. Whereas Germany... So how did that happen? And that question, for some reason, has become this huge point of debate recently. Well, more like a year ago, but this is when I'm getting to it. And it's very dumb because it's turned into this monocausal debate of the true cause of Japan's surrender. But here we go. So there are two arguments. Most people believe that it was the dropping of the 2 atomic bombs that scared Japan into surrendering. That is this camp's be-all, end-all point, given that on August 6th, one was dropped, showing Japan that the US had the capability, with the second dropped on the 9th, confirming that it wasn't some kind of one-off thing, and inferring that it could literally be done until there was no one left. Or they gave up. You know, simple cause and effect.
Bomb was finally released exactly at the designated hour, and the explosion occurred as planned.
The other big one is that Soviet intervention caused Japan's surrender. The story from that point of view goes, a bomb is dropped August 6th, Japan doesn't respond and doesn't care, but on August 9th, the Red Army invades Manchuria, and then the Japanese surrender, and they just kind of ignore the other bomb. Now, I'm gonna let you in on a secret. Both these takes are dumb. Seriously, whenever people discuss the surrender of Japan and make their case, it always involves the most flagrant use of cherry picking I have ever seen and ignoring certain facts. And I'm not even including all the counterfactuals when you expand the conversation to the morality of all of it, which, to be extremely clear, is not what this video is about. There's a whole different conversation. We are just talking about what got Japan to quit. I'm not going into that. I mean, maybe one day if yes, nice enough. Now, for all of this to become super clear, all you need is a timeline of events and to work out how they interact with each other, while not leaving any of them out. By mid-1945, everybody in Japan knew how bad the situation was. Absolutely no one held out any hope for what could be called a victory in the traditional sense of the word. There are no Steiner's counterattacks here. This is Japan in 1945. You are going to die. One thing often missed when talking about this was, at this point, that kind of victory wasn't the goal. The goal was really, at this point, just a negotiated peace to avoid utter defeat. And their plan for this was called Ketsugo. The general idea for it was to bleed the Americans until they gave up. Now, this is not far off from what the Japanese had hoped to do pretty much the entire war. They were always realistic about the fact that as long as morale held, they were going to get trounced by the United States. But what began as a hope for an anti-war sentiment after Pearl Harbor was now taking its final form here at the end, with now trying to take as many Americans with them as possible and hope there's some Japan left by the time they give up. And this plan was going to be enacted during the American invasion of Japan they knew was coming. These policies were enacted by a council called the Big Six, made up of 4 Navy, 2 Army, and 1 civilian member that had to agree unanimously on all decisions for the nation. And they were very, very united in this policy. All of this is to say that Japan wasn't just preparing for an invasion, they were hoping for it. It was the goal. They wanted the Americans to come to them and make Okinawa look like a joke, so that those weak-willed Americans would leave them alone. And Japan, although technically defeated in pretty much all its war aims, would still keep its institutions, government, and not be occupied. And until August of 1945, to the Japanese, it looked like that was going to pretty much have to play itself out. But then in the course of less than a week, all of that changed. On August 6, 1945, Little Boy was dropped on Hiroshima and destroyed. But surprisingly, for being the first people to have the literal power of the sun harnessed against them, the Japanese response was actually pretty muted. The Big Six and the government were not really impressed at all. Japan had a nuclear program during World War II, although it wasn't successful. It gave them a really good idea of how Herculean a task it was to create one of these things. And so for those who actually believed it was a nuclear device, they figured there was no way there could be...
I have no problem. If we want to, we can keep equivocating on this, and we could go down even more of these videos if the issue is cherry picking, because we could also not only go through this, we can go through all these sources here, any of the sources people bring up, but to say that Truman and then everyone else in the higher echelons of the U.S. government just wanted to commit a war crime on the Japanese instead of it being a far more complicated matter is, I think that's far more of a cherry pick than me going through one video and being like, okay, we can go through a bunch more videos and see if there's any commonalities or any discrepancies.
More than one. The Army and Navy's opinions were even more extreme, with the Army flat out denying that it was a nuclear weapon, demanding more evidence, and the Navy essentially saying, that's neat. Do it 5 more times and I might be scared. And as far as official responses from the Japanese government, there was nothing. Fast forward to 3 days later, the Red Army invades Manchuria with fantastic success, essentially rolling over the Kwangtung Army and its allies. As you can imagine, this was not ideal. Japan had been doing everything it could to not provoke the Soviet Union this entire war after 1939. And people in the Japanese government had actually been really hoping that the USSR might be convinced to mediate peace talks between they and the US. Peace talks with terms the US would never accept, but nonetheless. But although they were now fighting large country number 4 at this point, there was still no move to action from the government. Upon hearing the news, Army Chief of Staff, this guy, pretty much dismissed it out of hand, saying that, yes, this is an unwelcome development, but this does not invalidate Ketsugo, essentially saying, hey, if the Soviets want to land too, it's all killing allies to me. Then, no kidding, about 10 hours after the Soviet invasion begins, another bomb is dropped on Nagasaki, destroying it. But even then still, on the 9th, the Big Six cannot come to a unanimous decision for what to do. It takes until the next day, August 10th, that an imperial conference is called and Hirohito makes the decision to surrender, breaking a 3-3 tie on what to do. Now, this is normally where the retelling ends, but this leaves the situation far from sorted, as maybe the government decided to surrender, but what about the army? In fact, this whole war started because the army wasn't listening to the government in 1933. There's absolutely no guarantee that they're going to go along with this. In fact, right after the decision, General Kawabe's deputy chief of staff was asked by another senior general, what if the officers don't follow the order? To which he said without hesitation in his diary, yeah, a lot of them probably won't. And after that, just like he predicted, 2 of the 3 Japanese area army commanders, one in China and one in Southeast Asia, declared that they would not stop fighting. On top of this, there was actually a coup by a bunch of middle-ranking officers to steal the surrender declaration recording Hirohito made, and probably to kill pro-peace government figures and possibly even try to take control of the emperor himself. Now, the whole thing was horribly planned and had no chance of success, but it goes to show that the government saying, we give up, is not the end of the story. Skipping ahead, on August 15th, Hirohito's surrender declaration is played to the Japanese people. Now, it mentions only the atomic bombings and not the invasion of Manchuria by the Soviet Union. This has been used by those who argue the bombs solely ended the war as evidence for the fact that the Soviet Union played no part. But it makes sense why he would only mention this to the Japanese people, who both had a frame of reference for it and were being affected by it. The Soviet invasion of Manchuria would have meant nothing to them, and would not have made any sense as a reason to surrender, being something that was far off on the mainland. The opposite was the case everywhere else, though. Although Japan had officially surrendered, the army just flat out refused to stop fighting the Soviets in many sectors. This, as you can imagine, would be a political nightmare.
Channel Dark Corners reviews and its analysis of Godzilla goes so far as to say that the movie asks his audience to understand and sympathize with America deciding to bomb them. Interesting stuff. That is wild. What? Oh, what? No. That's worse. Hold on, what? Dark Corners reviews. I just want to know that I'm not familiar with this channel at all. Oh, he looks like he's done several Godzilla stuff. That's interesting. Huh. In that case, you know what? Let's click on this one and we'll go back to that later. That'll be interesting.
and can only go on for so long until your enemies just no longer believe that you're actually trying to surrender and start thinking that this was probably just some trick to buy time. So on August 17th, a shorter speech by Hirohito was given to call the military itself to surrender. And although the tone of both speeches are very similar, the call to action is over the Soviet intervention, with the bombs not being mentioned at all. But this also makes a lot of sense because it is directed at people who aren't in Japan and are bearing the brunt of fighting all these enemies abroad. To the individual commanders, hearing about Hiroshima and Nagasaki would have been an incredible non-issue given two things. One, city's been destroyed before. This was another firebombing of Tokyo by a different name. They had to be thinking, we were fine with that when it happened. How was the city different? And they also have no concept of what an atomic bomb even is. So the magnitude of the event was just lost on them. And two, Japan had already decided to fight this thing out till the end and rule over what was left. Since they were doing exactly that in the occupied territories, they 100% expected people to be doing that on the home islands. Mentioning the Soviet invasion implied that they couldn't really bleed the enemy to a stalemate anymore with a whole nother country arrayed against them. That kind of line of thinking utterly invalidates Ketsugo, and was really the only thing that would convince them to lay down their arms. Basically, at this point, there's so much against us, this stalemate, or this forcing the enemy to give up, just isn't possible anymore. You really see all of this play out post-war in memoirs for both points of view. Generals abroad always say the surrender came from the Soviet intervention. Governmental figures and those on the home islands will say it was the bombs. And that gets to my point. There's no singular reason for Japan's surrender. In the course of 3 days, just 3 days, things went from a terrible situation with basically a national suicide pact to the sky falling, both figuratively and literally, depending on where you were. And even after that, there were still significant holdouts. History is the study of cause and effect, but I think that people often want to make that a lot cleaner than it actually is. No event takes place for a singular reason, especially one as messy as this. So if I had to say why the Japanese surrendered in 1945, I think the Allies had something to do with it.
Yeah, so like generally, we could go through more videos, but it's really clear that it wasn't just the bombs that caused Japan to surrender, but it's also not just Truman deciding that he wants to just bomb innocent civilians, considering the fact that they had already been doing that with their fire bombings to begin with. So the idea that let's just kill a few more civilians, it's totally like the reason why we want to do this, instead of realizing that it's going to be a shock and awe event that needs to cause the Japanese to surrender. And when that even happens, there's already quibbling in the governments to the point where they can't come to an agreement. Other things keep happening for Japan because it's not just the Japanese and the US going at it, it's also everything else that's happening in the world. So like it's really odd to be like, to especially in the video here, to say this.
Rooms, wore lab coats, performed tests, all because the American government under Harry Truman and FDR decided they wanted to kill a bunch of Japanese civilians in the most horrifying way possible. This is true about Godzilla. He is here now, terrorizing Japan because of a...
Like, just to say that, oh, well, they really just wanted to kill civilians. It's really just, it's odd framing at worst. It's disingenuous at its worst. It's odd framing at its best.
Bureaucracy.
Well, he's a memory of the bomb, but it's also because of the bomb that he's changed so much. Because granted, we don't necessarily know for 100% fact whether or not the people of Odo Island actually directly saw Godzilla, or whether or not the rituals that they do in place are to ward off what they might have perceived to be Godzilla. At least in -1, for example, it's more cut and dry where they say directly what Godzilla has done. And granted, we could say that the old man had probably seen Godzilla at one point if he could make the claim that Godzilla was going on land eating people. But even then, it's interesting to note that in obviously the film, but then also in the book, we never hear or ever see Godzilla trying to directly eat people like he mentions. So like it makes sense what he's saying, but granted, like an older generation would be able to deal with Godzilla because the circumstances of Godzilla are just so vastly different.
The 2001 film Conspiracy is a retelling of the Wannsee Conference, the meeting on January 20th, 1942, at which a group of high-ranking Nazi officials decided upon the final solution, the extermination of the Jews. On first pass, the movie seems quite direct. It is here to give us an account of this important historical moment, and it does a great job at it. But I think it gets a lot more complicated than that. Conspiracy is, at its core, about words, about the difficult process through which words come to mean things. You can see this most obviously when it comes to the use of euphemism in the film. Conspiracy chooses a popular interpretation of the Wannsee Conference that says that when these Nazi officers said that they wanted to evacuate the Jews, they were simply trying to avoid using the word exterminate, murder.
I have the real feeling I evacuated 30,000 Jews already by shooting them at Riga. Is what I did evacuation? But when they fell, were they evacuated? There are another 20,000 at least waiting for similar evacuation. I just think it is helpful to know what words mean.
There is a tension in euphemism like this, a sense of unease. Here, words are not doing what they're supposed to do. They are not signifying as they normally would. And this feeling, it pervades the film. William Stuckart is arguably the most tragic figure in this movie. Stuckart was a co-author of the Nuremberg Laws, a set of rules that codify Jewish segregation and oppression. And now, during this conference, he's being asked to consent to the final solution, the rounding up and murdering of every Jew in Nazi territory, something with no legal precedent, something that cannot easily be justified by the Nuremberg Laws. Stuckart then wants his language to mean something, the text he wrote to do what it was supposed to do. As he says, he wants the law to bind.
My work, these laws, any legal code worthy of the name, restricts the enforcers of the law as well as its subjects. There are some things you cannot do.
But the law does not bind. It works only to serve the whims of power, and while its commands may look concrete, they exist only to justify actions that have preceded them.
We make the law we need. Why am I telling you this?
There is, at the end of the day, no authentic relationship between Stuckart's words and the policies of the Nazi state. And consider why this guy, Stuckart, is even here, why all these Nazis are here in this room. The big SS boy in charge, Heydrich, spends the entire film trying to gain the consent of these people. He wants them to tell him that they are invested in this final solution and think it is a good one.
And the inevitable solution is what we, together at this table, will discuss this afternoon.
But the whole thing is a charade. Their affirmation of complicity is a forced one. And in any case, this is the plan, the edict of Adolf Hitler. What use do their words have? What really do they even mean?
We will accomplish this. I will not allow administrative technicalities to slow it down. Every agency will jump to follow my order or asses will sting. And there are no shortages of meat hooks on which to hang enemies of the state.
Finally, we can interrogate what this film is about, what it depicts. I began this section by saying that it was a movie about the conference where the final solution was decided upon, yet even this seems somehow wrong. In reality, the Wannsee Conference did not change much of anything. Jews were already being exterminated en masse, and the people in the room did not see it as some life-changing event. Really, it was a formality, the SS consolidating the Jewish question under its control. Everything about conspiracy, then, communicates one thing, that these men will speak to each other and that everything that they need to say will be said.
Does it tear your heart out?
There will be rituals and laws and talk of sinister plans.
Beautiful.
There will be the appearance of meaning, but it can't exist here.
I've never understood the passion for Schubert's sentimental Viennese shit.
The very act of communication exists only for its own sake, to produce theater. To understand the contradictory nature of Godzilla, you have to look at the film's most interesting character, Kyohei Yamane. Yamane is a scientist, and when Godzilla is discovered, he doesn't want to kill the monster, but study him. This is for two reasons. The first is that he's a paleontologist, and this could be a huge discovery. You can see here Godzilla coming to represent the past. Him being killed does not merely rid the world of a monster, but of a primordial entity whose spirit, whose life, has value, who is, in some way, a part of us. But I find the second reason Yamane gives even more interesting. Toward the end of his little speech, he says this. We must study Godzilla because he is resistant to radioactivity, and it would be good if we could discover why that is and replicate it. I get chills just thinking about this. It is one of my favorite lines from any movie ever. Less than a decade prior, the world was revealed to be a place far more vulnerable than anyone could have imagined. A city was decimated, around 100,000 people died, and all because of one bomb. 3 days later, it happened again. And since that day, the bomb only got more powerful. Here we have a monster. He towers over the world and kills people and destroys everything, but he could also redeem us. Godzilla could save us from the bomb because he is the one thing that the bomb can't kill.
That's the fact also not only that the bomb can't kill Godzilla, but it's also the fact that it made Godzilla stronger too. But what's interesting to know that, like, it's not contradictory for Yamane to feel this way, because not only is a paleontologist seeing a living dinosaur alive and wanting to study it would be within his nature as a scientist, but also, and this is purely off of the book, in the book he explicitly states that studying Godzilla could help mend Japan's place on the world stage because of the actions committed during World War II, and as a result, the Japanese doing something to help the world in a meaningful way could be a way for them to atone for their sins. So, like, I don't see how Yamane's stance is contradictory, only in the sense of wanting to preserve his life. But it's consistent for his character. It's only contradictory against everyone else around him, which is made abundantly clear in the movie. This video is really disjointed. He did not need to include the conspiracy segment. That could have been cut or at least condensed. It has very little to do with the talk about Godzilla.
I'm Thinking of Ending Things is a 2020 Charlie Kaufman film about a woman, we'll call her Lucy, who takes a very strange trip with her boyfriend, Jake. In some way, I've already lied about the film, though. It's more complicated than that. See, the world Lucy inhabits is a kind of surrealist dreamscape, the invention of an elderly suicidal janitor. Years ago, the janitor approached a girl at a bar and she rejected him, barely noticed him.
I'm not even sure I registered him. There was a lot of people. I was there with my girlfriend. We were celebrating our anniversary, stopped in for a drink, and then this guy kept looking at me.
Now, he spends his final days concocting a fantasy for himself. A story with this girl where they took a long drive and met his family together and made it work. So then, what's going on here? Is this a story about Lucy or the janitor? Many an online think piece has been written trying to explain I'm Thinking of Ending Things answer this question, and they all come roughly to the same conclusion. Vanity Fair writes, older Jake has created a fantasy girl largely made up of books he's read and films he's seen. Den of Geeks writes, even though we are told the story through the eyes of the female narrator, she isn't real, she doesn't exist. Collider writes, while I'm Thinking of Ending Things is told from Lucy's perspective, she is simply a Tyler Durden-esque extension of Jake. In the end, these articles claim it's all pretty straightforward.
Yeah, you essentially get 3 videos in one, but I'm actually in the book, specifically when mentioning about where I'm saying that Yamane is explicitly stating that studying Godzilla for radiation is about trying to make the amends for Japan's actions during the war. How's this 3 vids in one? Because all of these videos so far have little to do with his analysis of Godzilla. Like, they don't connect really at all. But going here, we'll start on page 65. So it's not he's overthinking. It's that, like, there's just nothing Godzilla related in the other segments that he pulls them from the other movies. But Professor, I still don't entirely see where you're coming from. You probably don't, but Shinkichi, try to think about this from a higher perspective. During the war, the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima blew away an enormous city in a single instance. However, the hydrogen bombs we're testing now in the South Pacific are many hundreds of times more terrible than the atomic bombs dropped on Japan. They say it's dangerous for people even to eat the tuna irradiated by the hydrogen bombs. But just think, Godzilla was able to take all that radiation. If anything, it was because of the bomb's influence he's as strong as he is. When I say that that's not all that makes him so frightening, I'm not exaggerating. He's survived for millions of years. Think about that kind of vitality. The hydrogen bombs didn't even phase him. Where on earth could such a powerful life force possibly come from? If humans could have only just a small fraction of that vitality. As Shinkichi listened to the professor's explanation with its well-ordered line of reasoning, he wanted to interject. He felt sure that if he said the right thing, the professor's arguments would crumble. You're completely right, Professor, but fortunately, this amazing chance, Professor Yamane's explanation was so passionate and grandiose that Shinkichi could barely get a word in edgewise. I'll just start from the whole thing. So, fortunately, this amazing chance has been given to Japan. We Japanese have caused a great deal of trouble to people throughout the world. Carrying out this research is our one and only chance to make reparations for all that. Can't you see where I'm coming from, Shinkichi? So, at least I want to specifically say that, what source, Lamau? Sure. I literally am gonna screenshot the page that I'm referring to, so that everyone knows what I'm talking about. If we're really gonna quibble about like the source that I'm directly pulling from. So, and I'll just send that to myself, and I should be able to just save it and put it here on screen. So stop sharing. Go here. Messenger. That should be sent. Okay. And while that loads, there we go. Okay. And I'll share that again. So that should pull up there. I just want to see on the other end of us looking at it how that at least looks on the screen if I'm going to have to actually zoom in on that there. So at least you're able to, no, you're not going to be able to read that. Okay. So let me stop sharing. I'm just going to save it and we'll be able to zoom it in for the picture then. Save A1. Okay, 12. Picture. Cool. Present picture. Let's see how that looks. Yeah, that looks better. Okay. So it's specifically the segment right here that I'm referring to, where it's Yamane directly stating that studying Godzilla, at least from the perspective of preserving him and understanding his ability to survive radiation, is, in his own eyes, a way for the Japanese to atone for their actions in World War II. So I'll leave this on here for a few more seconds. So if someone's watching the stream after it's already ended, there's at least that right there that you can read through. And I can also move this out here as well. So at least the screen can be shown there for a few more seconds, and then we can get back to the video. Okay. Back we go.
Forward, actually. The janitor is the subject of the film, and Lucy his invented object. All of these articles have a point, of course they do. The movie makes it very clear that all of this is, in some sense, happening inside of the janitor's head in the days before he ends his life, and Lucy is a part of that. But even so, I think these writers here are missing a major yet kind of subtle point about this movie. Put simply, Lucy is always confused. In scene after scene of the film, she responds to the changing landscape of Jake's fantasy by being disoriented, upset, by thinking about how strange this situation is.
It's me.
No, it was me. Wasn't it me?
Sorry for the
When I was helping with the dishes.
I don't remember Jake helping his mother with the dishes.
I know that. Ames.
Ames?
I know that.
Is that short for Amy? That doesn't sound right. That doesn't seem like my name.
What I'm about to say might sound overly literal, but I think it's an essential observation. That's not possible. It is not possible for a figment of your imagination to find itself confused by how weird your imagination is. If Lucy were simply part of the janitor's mind, what would she have to be confused about? She'd already know what was going on. As Lucy says at the beginning of the film, actions may lie, but thoughts don't.
You can say anything. You can do anything, but you can't fake a thought.
And Lucy has thoughts. So then, what is Lucy? Is she her own character? Is she an invention? Well, I think the one clear answer is she's both. Lucy is at once part of the janitor's mind and an entity separate from that mind. She exists and she doesn't exist. And when you take a step back from this strange point, this contradiction that is Lucy, you start to notice something. I'm Thinking of Ending Things is all about this, about subjecthood, identity. It is a movie about the impossible to determine process through which someone can be said to be a person, the way in which a discrete consciousness comes to exist. Consider Jake's parents. Throughout their scenes, they shift constantly in age and lucidity, going from young to old and back again in the blink of an eye. Watching them, we can't help but wonder, which version are the real Jake's parents? If the passage of time changes them over and over, such that they lose everything about themselves, then how could they possibly possess a singular identity or subjectivity?
People like to think of themselves as points moving through time, but I think it's probably the opposite. We're stationary, and time passes through us.
Or consider the pig. As the janitor kills himself at the end of the movie, he walks with this pig he remembers from his childhood who was infested with maggots. Now this strange cartoon, he says this.
Someone has to be a pig infested with maggots, right? It might as well be you.
There is no meaning to identity, to the people we think we are or the minds we think we possess. We could have been born as anything, as Jake or Lucy, as Judd or Curly, as a rotting pig on the floor of a barn. It is all fundamentally the same. I'm Thinking of Ending Things is a film that describes entropy, not the entropy of matter or energy, but the entropy of human minds in relation to other minds, the process through which we become people and unbecome people, through which we cease to be separate from one another, through which subjectivity fails. The movie is filled with references and allusions and ideas, Oklahoma and Baby It's Cold Outside and poetry and Dairy Queen, and you want to tell a story with that. This is the janitor's experience. This is about him, meaningful because of him. But the thing about coherence as a concept is that it requires the ability to cohere, to produce a unified whole, and the movie won't let that happen. Toward the very beginning of the film, Lucy shows her landscape paintings to Jake's father, and this scene happens.
How can a picture of a field be sad without a sad person looking sad in the field?
How can you know something is sad without a person who's sad looking at it? How can you create meaning without a person, without a subject? And maybe the answer is simple. You can't. There is nothing good in Godzilla's death. Where later movies in the series tend to conclude with an action sequence, a big climax, a triumph, Godzilla 1954 does not. By the end of the movie, the monster is not attacking Tokyo anymore. Now he's just sitting in the depths of the ocean, bothering no one. We can't help but ask, if left to his own devices, would he even come back? Do we need to do this? As Godzilla dies, he lets out one of his iconic screams. But here, it feels different somehow. Before, Godzilla's noise was terrifying, inhuman. Now, in this moment, we come to realize that none of it was about us. He never wanted to menace anyone. He's an animal. This is what he sounds like. To kill Godzilla is far worse than whatever Godzilla could have done. It required starving the ocean itself of oxygen. Godzilla 1954 was, in no small part, a response to nuclear testing compromising the fishing yields in Japan's oceans. That is why he emerges, after all. There are no fish left for him to eat. And so it's striking that in order to finally kill him, they must finish the job, make the ocean barren. Godzilla is so big that to end him is to end life itself.
But they don't completely destroy the entire ocean. Plus, like, even though he pauses here that maybe Godzilla wouldn't have returned, Yamane's speech at the end mentions that if nuclear tests do continue, another Godzilla would appear. So even if we never got in a sequel, more than likely it's safe to say that Godzilla would have returned regardless, because Godzilla was already attacking ships prior to him attacking Tokyo. So even if we were to posit that Godzilla wouldn't attack Tokyo again, he was still doing other things to people's lives prior to that. I get that hesitating to use examples to compare it to Godzilla, but it's way too long and should have just been a quick comment. Just condense these segments to at least a paragraph and get on with it. Are those just what video essays are? All of them do the same thing? Like, but in what way though? Like examples then?
We never get another real scene with Yamane. He gives his speech and then Godzilla wrecks Tokyo, and we never hear him talk about not killing Godzilla again. He doesn't come around, he doesn't change his mind in some emotional moment, there's simply an absence there. It's as though Yamane can't, the film can't, acknowledge what it's doing, what it's saying to us. Godzilla meant everything, but that's kind of the problem. In the end, we must destroy what the bomb cannot.
What?
And in some emotional moment, hear him talk about not killing Godzilla again. He doesn't come around, he doesn't change his mind in some emotional moment, there's simply an absence there. It's as though Yamane can't, the film can't, acknowledge what it's doing, what...
Or because Yamane as a character's opinions haven't really changed on the scenario, but he still has like his own thoughts and feelings. Like it would be far more out of character for him to change his mind now and not have any build up to that.
It's saying to us. Godzilla meant everything, but that's kind of the problem. In the end, we must destroy what the bomb cannot. So this,
as well as like
acknowledge what it's doing, what it's saying to us. Godzilla meant everything, but
Godzilla didn't mean everything.
That's kind of the problem. In the end, we must destroy what the bomb cannot. So this video was sponsored by Nebula, my streaming service, and I think it's a pretty good time to be advertising it, honestly. As always, every month I put a bonus video.
Because, like, really, like, one of the biggest problems with the video starts like right towards the beginning.
Was exchanged. It always came with one bit of interpretation, that before he was bastardized through endless sequels, Godzilla was a metaphor for the atomic bomb. That's true. I mean, obviously that's true. Godzilla in that movie is a direct consequence of nuclear testing. He is radioactive. He destroys Japan. He is explicitly compared to the bomb. There's no denying it. That being said, though, I want to look here at one scene toward the beginning of the film. A woman sits on a train talking about Godzilla, Hiroshima, and now terrifying, but almost as an inconvenience, an irritating burden. If that is what he is exclusively meant to represent, then what the hell is the literal bomb doing here? Is the bomb.
I don't get.
If that is what he is exclusively meant to represent, then what the hell is the literal bomb doing here?
Well, he's essentially saying Godzilla means everything, but like right at the start of the video, he's saying that Godzilla is exclusively the hydrogen bomb.
What is the point of having both when they are supposed to be one in the same? Why reinvent what is already right there in the movie staring at us? Anyway, in this video, I want to talk about what Godzilla is, what he means, and why we need him even though the bomb already dropped.
And none of that was ever actually followed up on. Like, considering how so little of it actually has to do with Godzilla, it's like I don't really have too much else to say, because there's either so many like weird small bits added that don't make sense, and then everything else that's added on for the other movies don't really directly relate to Godzilla. Gotta go back to work. Alexa, remember that GXK's peak. It is not good, sir, but have fun on your shift. But I think this is the one where Martin MD said that apparently we are supposed to sympathize with America for dropping the bombs on this one. So let's see if that's the case. I'm gonna be very shocked if that's what he does say, because that's a yikes.
Godzilla is a unique film. That's a strange thing to say about a movie that draws on prior giant monster movies and which left so vast a legacy, but it's true. There are two obvious answers to where Godzilla came from. The first is a great film in its own right. The name Gojira is an amalgamation of the Japanese words for gorilla and whale, a reflection of how the monster was originally to look, and a giant monster in a city certainly suggests a connection. Plus, the Japanese always liked King Kong, as testified by the silent comic remake Wasei Kingu Kongu, a lost film which coincidentally is believed to have been destroyed during the US bombings in the Second World War. But here the similarities end. King Kong is a fairy tale. Godzilla is something else entirely, as evidenced by its first scene and its second major influence. Godzilla wasn't the first monster to be created by atomic testing. The previous year's Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, the feature debut of Ray Harryhausen, has the same origins, and it was apparently the film's Redosaurus that inspired producer Tomoyuki Tanaka to change his gorilla whale into a giant lizard. But the Beast from 20,000 Fathoms has none of Godzilla's social commentary or emotional core. Kong and the Beast from 20,000 Fathoms represent pretty much the only giant monster movies prior to 1954, and Godzilla borrows from both. Afterwards, however, Godzilla isn't the only factor in the making of these films. It didn't come out in the US until 1956 in the horribly recut Godzilla King of Monsters with Andy Raymond Burr.
Yep, there's the commonly cited 56 King of the Monsters bashing.
They're able to stop this creature. Before then, we saw radioactive giant ants in them, a radioactive giant octopus, and it came from beneath the sea.
Maybe one of them college boys short-circuited these nice new Geiger counters.
And a giant spider in Tarantula, which is growth hormones rather than radiation, but still. Point is, it wasn't just Japan that had an uneasy relationship with the bomb, but perhaps inevitably, it was Japan that best grasped the true horror of it and its effect on the lives of ordinary Japanese people. The devastation of a city may be spectacular, but the devastation of a village is somehow more personal. Although in all these films scientists try to figure out what's going on, it's notable that in all the US films, it's the military that provides the eventual triumph.
Fire! Fire!
The message is still fear the bomb, but it's tempered with don't worry, our boys will protect you. In Godzilla, the conclusion is less jingoistic and less certain. The military are powerless to protect their country, just as they were in reality. The eventual solution is altogether darker, and we'll come to it later.
How's it disrespectful? In terms of outside of like the easy ones, which is removing the Hiroshima Nagasaki scene and the scene with the mother and her kids. Outside of without naming those two examples, how is it so much more disrespectful given the context of film at the time and reception of foreign films at the time? As well as also, it's really weird that he says this.
Fire! Fire!
The message is still fear the bomb, but it's tempered with don't worry, our boys will protect you. In Godzilla, the conclusion is less jingoistic and less certain. The military are powerless to protect their country, just as they were in reality. The eventual...
In the case of at least American monster films, it's never just the military comes in, fights the monster, and they win, because even in the case... actually, the only one that's the closest to that would be King Kong, because I haven't seen It Came From Beneath the Sea in a long time, but I do know in them and in The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, it's not just the military succeeding. In fact, in The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, it's the military's engagement with the creature that unleashes the pathogen, and it's because of Nesbitt's plan to use the I was gonna say an antidote. It's not an antidote, and it's not a coagulant either. But he comes up with a strategy to shoot that into the Redosaurus to eventually kill it, so that they stop the pathogen. So it's a mixture of both science, but also the military. But it's never just military comes in, fights monster, we win, day is saved.
The solution is altogether darker, and we'll come to it later. US cinema was never really influenced by this aspect of Godzilla, but then why would it be? To them, it was just a monster movie. They never saw the real version. The Japanese, of course, did. And the sequel, Godzilla Raids Again, came out only 6 months later, starting a franchise. And what a franchise. 7 years after Godzilla Raids Again, King Kong vs. Godzilla was released, followed by a further 26 Japanese films, plus 2 US reimaginings, and more have already been announced. So how can we possibly say that 1954's Godzilla is unique? Well, although Raids Again followed so quickly, it ditched the somber tone of the original, focusing on the destruction and giving Godzilla another monster to fight. This trend of action over drama set the tone for all the sequels. Conflicted scientists were replaced with comic relief. Drama for adults became entertainment for kids.
Do you ever fight? No, I'm chicken.
and Godzilla changed from a terrifying force of nature to Japan's protector from other monsters. This series ended in 1975 with Terror of Mechagodzilla.
Are you saying the series ends in Terror Mechagodzilla? Let's see if, like, what he says about the Heisei series. Because it's always the same thing. It's like Godzilla went from really serious to really silly, and usually they never bring up the Heisei series, but it looks like that maybe what he's leading up to is about what the Heisei series does.
But in 1984, Godzilla, or Godzilla Returns, came out as a direct sequel to the original, ignoring the monster mashups in between, but still missing the gravity of the 54 version. And by 1989's Godzilla vs. Biollante, we're back.
But how did it miss the gravity?
To monsters brawls.
And I guess we're going to ignore any of the themes from Biollante.
This first reboot of the franchise wound up in the surprisingly downbeat Godzilla vs. Destroyer, which respectfully back-references the original. 4 years later, however, seemingly in response to the disappointing US remake, the Japanese Godzilla was rebooted once more in Godzilla 2000 for another 6-film series, ending in 2004 with Godzilla Final Wars. This film coincided with the 50th anniversary of the original, but love them or hate them, these sequels and reboots bear little or no relation to that film. The second US remake is an improvement on the first, and has a more serious tone, but in the end it's still big monsters fighting each other. This year's Shin Godzilla has been very well received, and is the first since the original to have something serious to say about nuclear proliferation, but still falls short. The bottom line is, the original isn't what people want from Godzilla anymore.
The irony. I know this. When did this one come out? This came out 7 years ago. The irony of that statement is hilarious.
Of course, Godzilla isn't the only monster in town, certainly not if the town is Tokyo. Other Scream monsters have been and gone, from Yongari to Megashark versus Mechashark, but none has left so indelible an impression, not even when a great director like Guillermo del Toro has a try. The original Godzilla is unique because it crystallized a moment in time. Many films use current events to inform their plots, and it tends to hurt their longevity because people watching now have a different frame of reference to those watching then. Godzilla somehow avoids this. It does not reference past events. It takes us there. In a way, it has more in common with more realist nuclear catastrophe films. Peter Watkins' disturbing docudrama, The War Game. Or the Raymond Briggs animation, When the Wind Blows.
Can't be anything wrong with you. I expect it's just the after effects of the bomb.
It's notable that when Ishiro Honda did some uncredited work on Akira Kurosawa's Dreams, the segments he worked on all involved war and nuclear holocaust. It's also worth mentioning Isao Takahata's Grave of the Fireflies, which deals with firebombs rather than nuclear, but is another Japanese film that successfully takes us to that time and place. In genre terms, the true successors to Godzilla are those films that try to use fantasy and horror concepts to reflect the world as it is now. What is the 21st century's equivalent to Hiroshima and Nagasaki?
Knowing how well populated that building is, there's another explosion down on the left side on the second World Trade Center tower.
Cloverfield's urgent found footage style and sense of the disaster unfolding before our eyes specifically linked it to 9/11. But it was criticised for turning a tragedy into entertainment. It fails where Godzilla succeeds, perhaps because Cloverfield sought to entertain, Godzilla to horrify. The contentious politics of the host threaten to overwhelm where its real power lies, a story of personal loss that is more like a kidnap drama than a traditional monster movie. It may be a very different story, but that personal tone links it to Godzilla. It is an immense catastrophe that still feels small scale, and it's a lesson that other films would do well to learn. As digital effects become more abundant,
I haven't seen this film in so long. Oh, so you've actually seen this one, Sokapunk.
the line between superhero movie and kaiju is increasingly blurred. These days you don't have to be Godzilla to battle city-destroying monsters.
I don't see how that's a party.
In the Godzilla sequels and in modern superhero films, buildings are knocked to the ground without a mention of the people who must be inside. The critic Mark Kermode has referred to this as weightless destruction. The loss of these lives has no significance. In 1954's Godzilla, thousands die, each leaving a heartbroken family behind. We can't possibly feel all that loss. And yet somehow we do. The human cost is always front and center. We often say that what sets Godzilla apart is that it deals with horrific real-world events in a fantasy context, but actually that's not true. It's not that it deals with these events, it's how. Firstly, Godzilla doesn't just reference events, it addresses them by introducing Professor Serizawa's Oxygen Destroyer. This is a weapon of mass destruction that would save Japan, but Serizawa fears what he might unleash on the world. Given the film's theme, you might expect Serizawa to back off, but in fact, he uses the weapon. This is Godzilla's most daring moment, asking its Japanese audience to identify and empathize with the decision made by their attackers. Secondly, it's dramatic events, but to do it with this much sensitivity, to make the events resonate, to make each life count, to feel a personal connection to those events and people, even at a distance of 70 years. That's great filmmaking.
Well, it's also due to the fact that since these people directly were around for these events and were in positions to where they had more inside knowledge and information, not on like a super great level, but compared to just any civilian, it does lend a far greater bit of credibility to not only the characters, but also the like just generally how they're able to bring Godzilla to life. Zim, are you okay? You sound a bit mad at the stream. I think you're probably like really far behind then. But one sec, let me go all the way right back here.
Given the film's theme, you might expect Serizawa to back off, but in fact, he uses the weapon. This is Godzilla's most daring moment, asking its Japanese audience to identify and empathize with the decision made by their attackers. Secondly, it's...
I wouldn't say that that's the case. I think that, like, you could make that argument, and it could be argued that due to having Serizawa kill himself, that allows there to be a little bit of absolving of Serizawa's decision to make the oxygen destroyer in the first place, but it's also due to the fact that because Serizawa's entire arc and what he does is so contained, you have him create the oxygen destroyer, use the oxygen destroyer, but also his nose will burn so no one can recreate it, and he also uses it himself and ends up killing himself. Therefore, the oxygen destroyer can't proliferate like the hydrogen bomb. It makes sense that like someone could get a read like that. I don't think that was necessarily the case, but I think that it could be mirroring those events. It'd probably be interesting if I could find like any books that talk about whether or not the Japanese had any information on J. Robert Oppenheimer. But as far as I know, I don't think there was too much information. But yeah, like it's not the worst read. That could have been far worse. I thought that, at least from what you were saying, Martin, I thought you were saying that like you meant that we're trying to sympathize with like America as a whole, or like specifically J. Robert Oppenheimer. But yeah, that's not as bad as I thought it was going to be. Okay.
Easy to reference traumatic events, but to do it with this much sensitivity, to make the events resonate, to make each life count, to feel a personal connection to those events and people, even at a distance of 70 years. That's great filmmaking. In a strange way, Godzilla's big secret isn't that it's really about Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It's that it didn't have to be. Viewed simply as a disaster movie, it's still a brilliant and emotionally draining film. How great is Godzilla? The film gave birth to a franchise now into its 7th decade. Its success led to Rodan, Mothra, Varan, and of course, in its home country, while Yonggary, Reptilicus, and Gorgo sprang up in others. It inspired and continues to inspire directors and films. And yet few of them even come close to the original. How great is Godzilla? It is unique.
Okay, that was not the worst thing I was thinking of. Okay. It's interesting to note that like anytime you look at a 54 Godzilla video, you always find like someone else talking about it. A nuclear warfare inspired Godzilla GameSpot universe. Ooh, it's a GameSpot video. Well, you know what? Let's do that. I think honestly, I'm not all that surprised that the take wasn't as bad as I was assuming it was going to be, because it looks like the guy already generally does like monster movie content. Great that doesn't absolve him from like having bad takes, but like it's really clear that at least he's far more familiar with the genre and the material rather than someone else who's like doing it on like a whim. But let us keep going.
Carnage, destruction, terror. What you are looking at is the result of a nuclear nightmare. And no, not the atomic bomb, but rather an atomic monster, known as Godzilla.
Weighing in at 20,000 tons and standing at 164 feet tall, Godzilla seems like an impossible work of science fiction, yet the origins of the monster are deeply rooted in our reality. It's the living embodiment of nuclear warfare, a symbol tragically spawned from the very real destruction of Hiroshima and Nagasaki during World War II.
But beyond the decimation of 2 prominent cities, it was actually an accident involving a small tuna trawler that struck the deepest nerve in post-war.
Have I seen Curious Archive's new video? Yeah, I did see it. It's the one about like the end of the world and all that. And he does bring up a little bit of Godzilla, but that video doesn't really have everything to do with Godzilla. So I don't think I'd ever really cover it. I may cover it in a like writing, like a Kaiju roundtable probably.
War Japan, known coincidentally as the Lucky Dragon. To a clever film producer, this tragic incident spelled opportunity.
Accompany that with director Ishiro Honda's own horrific experiences with war, and we have Godzilla, the anti-war monster. Our story begins several decades before. Coincidentally, cities, it was actually an accident involving a small tuna trawler that struck the deepest nerve in post-war Japan, known coincidentally as the Lucky Dragon. To a clever film producer, this tragic incident spelled opportunity. Accompany that with director Ishiro Honda's own horrific experience.
Saying that sound like opportunity, that makes it sound way more malicious, but
Experiences with war, and we have Godzilla, the anti-war monster. Our story begins several decades before World War II with a young aspiring filmmaker, Ishiro Honda. Described as kind and reserved, Ishiro had no interest in the foreign affairs Japan entangled themselves with during the early 20th century. Instead, Honda wanted to tell stories. He wanted to be a kantoku, aka a movie director. However, Ishiro's path to the latter would have an unfortunate detour with the former. After graduating high school, he propelled himself into a newly established film major program at the Nihon University. As far as he knew, his dreams were on track. He got a job at an up-and-coming film studio where he began to forge industry bonds. It's also where he met lifelong friend Akira Kurosawa and also his eventual wife, Kimi Yamasaki. However, it all came to a devastating halt when in the fall of 1934, he was drafted into the Japanese army. Having been adamantly anti-war, his draft was, as he claimed, the saddest thing that could happen to him. He was 23 years old.
At the time Ishiro Honda was drafted into the Imperial Army, he was just embarking on his...
that's really cool. They brought Steve Rifle on for this. So, you know, maybe this isn't too bad if you've got Steve Rifle on.
Dream of becoming a filmmaker, but he went into his military service with the attitude that he would complete that service and eventually go back to his civilian life and pursue his dream. But what happened was there was a series of events that really thwarted his trajectory as a filmmaker, and he would end up spending the better part of a decade from roughly 1936 to 1945 in the Imperial Army.
Full of resentment, Ishiro knew that he had no choice and that protesting would only make matters worse. If I were to show my anti-war feelings, then I'm sure I would not have survived, not even a day. During his deployment, Honda would find himself sent back and forth overseas, occupying different areas of China. He survived countless battles and endured the horrors of war firsthand along the way. My superior officer killed a young Korean today with his bayonet. I'm trying to adjust to the environment around me, but if you were a normal person in this place, you'd either kill yourself or go crazy. He maintained his humanity and promised to treat the Chinese without animosity and his fellow soldiers with dignity. Then, on August 6, 1945, Japan changed forever. The United States dropped its first atomic bomb, codenamed Little Boy, on Hiroshima, resulting in 15 kilotons of force, a fireball 370 meters in diameter, and temperatures as high as 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit. People were incinerated, gruesomely burned, and crushed by debris. It killed an estimate of 140,000 people, 40% of the city's population. 3 days later, Fat Man, another bomb, was dropped on Nagasaki, killing an estimate of 74,000 people, 29% of the population. The cities were left in ruins, trees stripped of life, covered in layers of highly radioactive ash, later known as black rain. The bombings were the diabolical end to World War II, and after 8 years, Ishiro Honda could finally go home.
Honda came home in the spring of 1946, and that experience was harrowing in itself. These soldiers were packed onto crowded ships. They were given some money for train fare and some food, and put on trains and sent home. And Honda's train passed through the ruins of the city of Hiroshima. What he saw really had a profound effect on him. He saw the flattened ruins of an entire city that had been decimated by the atomic bomb. This image would stay with him, and this is why, when he would receive the assignment to direct Godzilla, nearly a decade later, he would decide to use all of that experience that he had in the war, and more specifically, the experience of witnessing the destruction of the atomic bomb, and basically imbue the monster Godzilla with all of that destructive power, use the film as more than just a monster movie, but as a cautionary tale and a warning to the world about the dangers of atomic weapons and the folly of the nuclear arms race.
He arrived home in March of 1946, and nearly 35 years old, Honda was eager to start his life over. I lived and survived only by thinking, when can I go home? When can I make movies again? The bombings in Honda's story were all but a few pieces in the creation of cinema's monster satire. The final domino had yet to fall. Japan's anxieties remained high long after the war's end, with many of the bombing survivors undergoing unexpected discrimination. Days after the bombs fell, survivors began showing symptoms of radiation poisoning. They were labeled as hibakusha, which literally translates to atomic bomb-affected people. Symptoms included hair loss, bleeding from the gums, purple spots, pain, fevers, often resulting in death. The bombs continued to claim lives even long after they had fallen. Rumors spread that radiation poisoning was contagious, and the public became increasingly terrified of hibakusha. Eventually, bombing survivors were turned away from homes and even refused food from farms. The hibakusha were cast out and tensions continued to rise. Japan lived in constant paranoia of another attack, a fear that was validated as the US continued to test thermonuclear bombs.
Do you have a favorite analysis of Godzilla 4, whether it be a book or on YouTube? Yeah. Honestly, I'm probably like, do I really want to finish the video? Because like, there honestly isn't anything like wrong with the video so far. This one's a little bit more provocative, but let me move over. I would say, like, out of all these, if we just look up Godzilla 1954 review, I probably At least the ones here on YouTube. Big Action Bills is really good. Not saying Gojis. Probably I would say Big Action Bills is the best. If you want to see one that has a good comparison between the 54 and 56, Paper Fins is really good for that, so that you can just cross reference anything pretty easily for that. What's his name? What's it called? Up from the Depths is pretty good too. I definitely would say, like, out of all of these, Big Action Bills is the best compared to all the others. And then I would also say Wiki. So generally, if you just want a little bit of information on Godzilla is the Monster and a few other small tidbits that you're going to find in any of the books, such as the one that Steve Rifle wrote about, which was Ishiro Honda. That one. The one that August Ragone wrote is the Eiji Tsuburaya Master Monsters. That one has some good, interesting tidbits in it. If you want something that's like a really normie one to pick up, probably the Godzilla FAQ book that you can find almost anywhere. It's super out of date, but that one's like at least good to give to someone to sort of get them into it. The thing with that is I think it was like it's primarily just mostly like taken from actually no, it's not that one. It's a different one. There was a Godzilla book that's like literally just the encyclopedia stuff on Godzilla just put into a book format, but the FAQ book's pretty good. I would love to see them do an updated one for that because of the fact that I think the anime trilogy stuff is in it. Shin's kind of in it, but not too much of it. And obviously -1 isn't in it, or the rest of the Monsterverse stuff. So yeah, those would be kind of where I would like say like my favorites for analysis wise. And then yeah, for Wikizilla 2, the other versions of the first Godzilla, that's another one that's pretty good as well. And let me go back because it doesn't give too much more information for like people who are regularly doing a lot of research or really into Godzilla, but Steve Reviews is pretty good. So that'd be another one. I've never seen this Sunday movie, never seen this one. Obviously Alex the Hunted, Godzilla fan. Is this okay? Never seen the Spring Roshi's one, so have no reference for it. Deck of Shadows one, it's like that kind of Channel Awesome style review to it. If you like his personality, you'll like his stuff, although it's not super in depth in terms of its analysis. And obviously James Rolfe, although not super like super informative now, given that actually there's a lot of stuff he gets wrong in some of his Godzilla stuff. It's still like I still like his stuff, but it's going 2 times speed. I just want to see if I actually do end up catching something in this. Now I'm like, that's really just bad.
Right outside of Japan and Korea during the Cold War. And then tragedy struck, confirming Japan's paranoia. On March 1st, 1954, the U.S. tested a hydrogen bomb near the Marshall Islands, a bomb that was twice as powerful as anticipated. Its nuclear fallout formed into a fine white ash that was carried by the wind, where it later showered the Lucky Dragon tuna vessel and its 23 crew members for 3 hours. That ash, later called Shi no Hai, or death ash, stuck to the bodies and hair of the fishermen. The crew suffered the same symptoms of the Haibakusha. On September 23rd, chief radio operator of the Lucky Dragon, Akichi Kabayama, died at the age of 40, a victim of a hydrogen bomb. The events resulted in panic, causing an anti-nuclear movement, a tuna boycott from fear of contaminated fish, and for the Haibakusha, right as they began to put their lives together, everything seemed to unravel all at once. Japan was in hysteria. But through the hysteria and fear, some saw an opportunity. Japanese film producer Tomoyuki Tanaka took notice of America's wave of successful monster films like King Kong, Mighty Joe Young, and The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, and was looking for a chance to ride the wave. Tanaka worked fast to co-opt the Lucky Dragon incident, and the fear ensued, and began pitching it as
actually, yeah, that's completely incorrect. It's a good thing we actually kept watching this because it's because that since In the Shadow of Glory fell through, he needed to find some way to like have a film on slate for the release. And that's when he thought up the idea of a monster. And he was pulling, like he says here, from American monster movies, but it wasn't like he was just sort of like sensationalizing a tragedy.
Foundation of Japan's own monster movie. The idea fell into Shiro Honda's hands. With it, he set out to make more than a B-movie monster film. It was a chance to inject his own views and experiences and tell a serious story that reflected the fears and terrors of a post-war Japan. If Godzilla had been a dinosaur or some other animal, he would have been killed by just one cannonball. But if he were equal to an atomic bomb, we wouldn't know what to do. So I took the characteristics of an atomic bomb and applied them to Godzilla.
Wasting no time, Godzilla opens with its own retelling of the Lucky Dragon incident, showing a tuna trawler encountering him in the middle of the ocean. From Godzilla's presence alone, the fishermen are exposed to massive amounts of radiation, which precisely emulates the real-life crew members of the Lucky Dragon, who were exposed to the nuclear fallout of the hydrogen bomb test. Later, headlines read Atomic Tuna, which is a direct parallel of the fish boycott that followed the Lucky Dragon incident.
Most of the film's second act spends time slowly building tension and speculation into Godzilla's next attack, like waiting for the next bomb to drop.
It isn't until an hour in that Godzilla finally emerges again from the ocean, ravaging through buildings and power lines. When he finally unleashes his blast, the city is set aflame. People are vaporized, while others scramble to safety, evoking the same terror and visuals of an atomic bomb. The imagery of the city's decimation is uncanny to Hiroshima and Nagasaki's bombings. Slowly, the film takes its time to pan through the leveled plains of what once was, like Honda observed from his train window in 1946. The aftermath is devastating, from showing children measured for radiation poisoning to the dead carried away in stretchers. One particular shot of a child bursting into screams in fear and sadness exemplify the horror of the situation.
The film's stance on war is also firmly apparent through its characters and dialogue, especially Dr. Serizawa, the scientist who created the oxygen bomb, the Godzilla killer.
Serizawa's character can easily be seen as a direct portrayal of real-life theoretical physicist J. Robert Oppenheimer, the father of the atomic bomb, who famously said,
After the Japan bombings and the war was over, Oppenheimer lobbied for control over nuclear power in an effort to avert the spread of production of the very weapon he helped create, a testament echoed by Dr. Serizawa.
The film's tone has a feeling of despair and uncertainty, a feeling that mimics the plea and fear of a post-war Japan. Dr. Serizawa sacrifices himself in the end, not in a heroic attempt to kill Godzilla, but instead to destroy the knowledge behind the accident destroyer, in hopes to prevent its recreation ever again. After Godzilla is destroyed, the outcome isn't triumphant. It's curiously tragic and ends rather somberly.
The film's closing line serves as a warning to the danger and vicious horror of nuclear warfare, validating the film's strong anti-war stance.
It's not just the atomic bomb that makes Godzilla what it is. It's really a film about the collective experience of the Japanese people, both during and after the war. I think that the reason the film resonated so much and was successful when it came out was that people could recognize not only imagery that looked, just like the firebombing in Tokyo or just like the aftermath of Hiroshima, but they also recognized in the experiences of the people in the film, their country in the span of 10 years was completely transformed. That's the interesting thing to me. You watch this film from 1954, if you try to put your head in the mind of a Japanese viewer watching that, you don't understand, like 10 years before that, their country was completely different.
Godzilla eventually transcended the horror he was founded on, commonly embodying a sympathetic creature that the world would often rely on to protect it from greater threats. Despite its believed real origins, Ishiro and Toho Company transformed the creature into an iconic anti-hero, with Ishiro routinely returning to the director's chair. Godzilla's impact on popular culture is simply undeniable, and quite remarkably, kickstarted the tokusatsu genre that still remains ever prevalent today, defining an entire industry for Japanese cinema. Godzilla would be used many more times as a means to confront bigger issues, most notably in 1971's Godzilla vs. Ghidorah, which was a reaction to pollution, and again in 2016's Shin Godzilla, which reflected the 2011 Tohoku earthquake and tsunami. And of course, we can't possibly ignore America's adaptation of the giant monster inadvertently inspired, twisting it into a spectacle of Hollywood action. The most recent film, Godzilla King of the Monsters, molds the monster into a full-blown hero. My God, Godzilla! And in a bizarre twist, demeans the values and views the original was founded on.
In all of these Americanizations of Godzilla or American adaptations, the true origin of the monster is obscured in some way, and I find that really interesting. Americans have always had, to a certain extent, difficulty discussing Hiroshima and dealing with the fact that we nuked 2 Japanese cities. Hollywood has always had trouble taking Godzilla on his own terms because there's a fear, I think, that the audience won't accept that.
Yet, on the other hand, Godzilla managed to bridge both cultures together. Godzilla's journey into being a positive force could easily be related to Honda's own outlook and positivity on the world, in spite of the horrors he experienced firsthand. But still, 32 films and 6 decades later, Godzilla's been represented as a villain, a hero, and a satire, each era resonating with different audience members for entirely different reasons, a legacy that Ishiro Honda helped cultivate through the years.
Thank you so much for watching this episode of True Fiction. Now, Godzilla is near and dear to...
Yeah, I know definitely Steve Rifles had his controversial takes about the Monsterverse as well as just 98 in general, but it's 98, so I'll give him a pass for that. But yeah, I know like generally his feelings about it has always been that America can't grapple with a bomb like I think he believes that they should, and because of that they can't really do Godzilla justice, which I don't necessarily think is the case. But we shall keep going.
Let me take you back to July 16th, 1945. On this day, a team of nuclear engineers detonated the world's first nuclear device ever, right here in New Mexico. It's hard to overstate this moment. This moment ended an era and started
Sorry, I'm new here, but I'm assuming you like -1, right? How would you rank it for you? It's top 3 for me. Well, what's it called? Thank you for joining on. I'm happy that you that you're here. In terms of where I'd rank it, it's probably now my favorite Godzilla film, followed by Godzilla 2000 as my second favorite, and Godzilla 54 being my third favorite. So, if anyone is wondering where I'd place all the films, yeah, that's what I'd do.
21 days later, a U.S. bomber flew over a city in southern Japan with one of these bombs in its belly, and it dropped it from 30,000 feet above the ground. The bomb dropped for 43 seconds before exploding a few hundred meters above the ground, turning this city into dust. This was the first time that a nuclear weapon had ever been used to kill humans. And 3 days later, the U.S. dropped another one on another city in Japan. 360,000 people, most of them civilians, dead from these attacks. The president at the time, Harry Truman, was on a ship crossing the Atlantic from Europe, his voice broadcasting across the world. An American airplane dropped one bomb on Hiroshima.
That's a top 3 for me. Shan84 and Final Words. Hey, what's it called? If you guys are in the comments, just list your top 3 favorite Godzilla movies. So I'll just put them here. 2000. 54. Yep, 1945. Jeez, wow. Weird. Too much. I'm gonna stop that right there. Too much talk about specifically the bombs, and I get that wrong. I am truly a fake fan. I am sorry. So, 2000, 1954. Top 3 for me, currently no particular order, 54 -1 and KOTM. Top 3 for me, KOTM -1 GMK. And yeah. That's here. Solo movies.
That bomb has more power than 20,000 tons of TNT.
The nuclear era had begun, and soon the Soviet Union was developing a bomb of their own. It became a race who could develop the biggest and best bomb. But this nuclear bomb technology was unpredictable and not really well understood. The only way to keep developing it was to test it so that they could understand how to build these things. The first test was here in the US, but soon the tests moved far away from the US, deep into the Pacific. This is the story of a bomb, but it's also the story of the cultural shockwaves that these faraway tests created here in the US and around the world. From French swimsuits to propaganda films meant to deceive the nation, to monsters and Japanese protest films, this story has some twists and turns. So buckle up and let me tell you the story of why the US bombed the shit out of these islands.
The bomb will not start a chain reaction with water, converting all the gas, letting all the ships on all the oceans drop down to the bottom.
We have spent more than $2 billion on the greatest scientific gamble in history, and we have won.
One second, let's just take a quick pause to talk about today's sponsor, who is Policy Genius.
Nope, you get no ads, sir.
Okay, let's back up and talk about that very first nuclear test in New Mexico. This is the bomb that they used. They blew this thing up in the most remote place they could find in the US, 100 miles south of Albuquerque in the middle of the New Mexican desert. Because this was the first nuke ever, no one really knew what was going to happen. They had no idea how explosive this thing was. And so this guy who ran the test range, his name was Norris Bradbury, he was in charge of like measuring this, like assessing how big the blast was so he could report and be like, these nuclear bombs are this powerful. He was not ready for what he saw next. After the explosion, he said, verbatim, quote, "The atom bomb did not fit into any preconceptions possessed by anybody, i.e. you can't fathom how insanely powerful this thing is. You could see the flash and feel the shockwave from 160 miles away. It was clear that this bomb was unpredictable and hard to measure. And scientists were realizing that the radiation from this bomb could spread, and they didn't know how much and how far and how dangerous this thing would be. The director of the project, the nuclear weapons, sort of freaked out with the lack of precision on all of this. He's like, did we just poison the entire southwestern United States with radiation? So they realized that they had to find a more remote place if they were going to keep testing their nukes. And so this is where the treasure hunt for the perfect nuclear testing site begins.
It is the duty of the military services to explore the military might of this new weapon.
So you get these two naval officers who were tasked with like finding the next nuclear test site. And they literally just said, quote, "We just took out a dozen maps and started looking for remote sites." Okay, I can get on board with just pulling out a bunch of maps and just like perusing around. That's sort of what I do in my spare time, so I can totally see this happening. As they were looking at these maps, they quickly realized that nowhere in the US is like a good fit for a nuclear test site. They needed somewhere that was extremely far away from population centers, and they needed it to be not like freezing cold like in Alaska or something. I'm just imagining Harry Truman, the president at the time. In the course of 30 days, this guy just tested this new bonkers technology, which happened to put an entire city at risk. He literally destroyed 2 Japanese cities and won the war with this technology. From like a global control and leadership perspective, this guy is feeling very powerful. Except for he's a little bit nervous about the intel that the USSR is working on the same weapon. They've been doing it for 3 years, and the world is generally in a state of uncertainty. Empires that ruled for centuries are losing control. There's now 2 governments that are competing for global dominance, and these weapons, these nuclear weapons, are the key to winning. And now Truman is being told that you can't test these weapons on American soil because they're too close to population centers. So what do you do? So Truman decides that if the perfect nuclear test site doesn't exist, he will make it exist. So back to these maps. Where do we go? Where do we set up the test site? They start looking far, far away off of US soil, deep into the ocean. And they eventually settled on this little strip of beach called the Bikini Atoll.
This is Bikini. It is here that the military and scientific personnel conduct the tests for the atomic bomb.
The name Bikini means coconut island, roughly, in the local language. They liked this island because the weather was good. There wasn't a lot of storms, and it had this nice lagoon that they could position a naval fleet there to see what nuclear weapons do to naval vessels. These islands had sort of been conquered by Japan, and the US obviously conquered Japan, so they sort of took over these islands, but they didn't officially own them. But they wanted to. The problem was that there was a bunch of people living on these islands. Oh, and by the way, this isn't 1893. You can't just show up and steal islands anymore without people getting sort of pissed off. So Harry Truman, what do? You send in this guy.
Mr. Ben Wyatt.
Thank you. The guy's name was Ben Wyatt. No, not that one. It's a different one from like the 40s. and he's on a mission to obtain this atoll from the locals so that the U.S. can turn it into their nuclear playground. One of the secret reasons why the U.S. picked this island wasn't just because of the weather and the lagoon. It was also because these people had already been visited by Christian missionaries. They were used to white people arriving to their country and trying to convince them of things, and this became really useful. So one Sunday after church, he gathers all the local Bikinians to ask them if they would like to leave their island, and he promises them this will be temporary. We just need it for a little bit. People are like, okay, but don't worry, Ben is prepared for this. He's got something in his back pocket. He starts to compare the Bikinians to the children of Israel, the chosen people, saying that this is their duty to leave the island so that the U.S. can pursue their noble aim of testing nuclear weapons.
The United States government now wants to turn this great destructive power into something for the benefit of mankind.
He's just buttering them up with Jesus, and it is so blatant.
And everything being in God's hands, it must be good.
So eventually, we're not really sure how it all went down with whatever backroom deals, but under the condition that these people will be able to come back, they agreed to leave the island to hand them over to the U.S. But wait, don't go yet, says Ben Wyatt. After the deal is made, he invites a film crew from National Geographic to stage a reenactment of the whole scenario, to make a film for a month.
Scene 25, take one.
They had these like shoots in the churches that they had to have the people there like go to church several times so that they could get it from different angles.
They sing their own version of Glory to God in the Highest.
They made this huge propaganda film, and guess what it was for? The American people. It was like, look, United States, yes, we're taking over this island, but look at how happy these people are. They love this. Look how cool Ben Wyatt is with his like charismatic, convincing, persuasive Jesus talk. So the U.S. is one step closer to having their nuclear playground. They ship away these natives to nearby islands with no food, water, or shelter. And then the bombs begin. They dropped their first nuke on Bikini Atoll on June 30th, 1946. These were much bigger bombs than were dropped in Japan. And unlike the original tests, which were very secret, the U.S. now wanted the world, or the Soviet Union, to know about it. It was like a giant PR campaign, the opposite of top secret.
A radio station will be broadcasting from Bikini.
And it totally worked. Soon the whole world was like, what? The U.S. is like testing atomic bombs on a random atoll in the middle of the Pacific? A few days after this first.
It's hard to believe that Mint Mobile can get...
Oh, look, it's Deadpool.
A French fashion designer released his new swimsuit. It was a two-piece women's swimsuit that, wait for it, revealed a woman's belly button. Highly scandalous. There was a ton of outcry. It was highly controversial. And when he announced it, he saw an opportunity to ride this publicity wave happening from the nuclear test. So he named the swimsuit the Bikini. It was radical, it was scandalous, it was controversial, but it totally worked.
Question, should the bikinis be banned?
He and his swimsuit got tons of attention, both good and bad.
Do you think the bikinis should be banned?
Why don't you use Brave? It's free, no ads. Because I'm lazy.
What do you do? Oh, definitely not. A lot of them wear a bikini. Why wear anything at all?
But the naming of the bikini is just the beginning of how these nuclear bombs started shaping and influencing popular culture. Children's toys, comics, cartoons, superheroes, alcoholic drinks, beauty pageants, songs. The word atomic was everywhere. People started saying, you're the bomb, as a compliment. People calling someone atomic now meant you're hot. And all the while, the tests on Bikini got bigger and more frequent. Way, way bigger than anything that happened in Japan. You know that bomb that killed over 350,000 people? Yeah, these bombs were way bigger. And people started to get scared. So much so that the commander for these Bikini tests had to get up in front of the nation and dispel some of these fears, like whether or not the bomb would blow up the whole ocean.
The bomb will not start a chain reaction in the water.
Or whether or not it would turn the ocean into gas.
Converting it all to gas, letting all the ships on all the oceans drop down to the bottom.
Or one of the leading theories was that this bomb was so intense that it would crack open the earth and the core would leak out and it would be the end of gravity.
It will not blow out the bottom of the sea and let all the water run down the hole. It will not destroy gravity. I am not an atomic playboy.
Wait, what did he just say?
I am not an atomic playboy.
Oh my god. Yeah. So it turns out this guy was in love with what was happening on Bikini. He was just like so into this. And after the first test, he staged a giant celebration in which a literal nuke-shaped cake was produced. And it turns out that some people didn't like the fact that this guy was celebrating like the advent of this destructive weapon, especially surrounded by women, quote, dressed to the nines. And so because of all of this partying and the cake and whatever, he was dubbed the Atomic Playboy. It's just an amazing title.
I am not an atomic playboy.
Okay, but there's one more very important way that these nuclear tests on Bikini influenced our culture. And it's not swimsuits, and it's not even SpongeBob, who lives in Bikini Bottom and occasionally has a run-in with nukes.
Atom by atom!
It's what happened in February 1954 when they tested this guy, a particularly huge bomb, 1,000 times larger than Hiroshima. When this bomb was detonated at Bikini, the Japanese tuna fishing boat named Lucky Dragon was nearby. I mean, it wasn't nearby, but for this bomb, it was in range. It received a large dose of radiation, and the crew of 23 men returned to Japan, where they were hospitalized. It was reported that some of the tuna from their boat was sold and consumed by Japanese citizens.
The ship's cargo of punnyfish was found to be radioactive and had to be buried in the ground.
You have to understand, radiation is a freaky thing. It is this invisible force that destroys your cells without you ever seeing or feeling anything at first. This panic spread, and Japan's fishing economy took a giant hit. Japanese citizens were horrified.
Throughout the towns and villages of Japan, people young and old are adding their signatures to this appeal. Stop the experiment. Outlaw the bomb.
And one activist created a protest film which took place on an island that has a very similar resemblance to Bikini. And then near this island, a monster named Gojira is born. He comes out of the ocean, quote, emitting high levels of H-bomb radiation. Are you getting where we're going here? The first thing that the monster does after emerging was destroying a tuna boat labeled Lucky Dragon. I mean, this is totally on the nose. It's not like a hidden symbolism film. This film was a pointed protest at all of these tests and the effects that they were having on the local people, ecology, and economies. And it helped mobilize a fierce anti-nuclear movement in Japan that was already there because of what Japan had already experienced. Oh, and the film was actually pretty good. So the film actually came to the US too. It was dubbed over in English for US audiences, but it was renamed to Godzilla, and it was edited to remove all of the overt anti-nuclear symbols. The government's like, we can't have that happening. We're putting so much work into the PR of projecting how good nuclear weapons are. No way some protest going from Japan about a monster is good.
I mean, let's do this. Protest spring jam constitutes, well, yeah, a proper demonstration. filming protest demonstrations. Yeah. So there isn't really like any criteria for like what a protest film is, but at least we'll define what protest means here. So a protest is a statement or action expressing disapproval of or objection to something. Express an objection to what someone has said or done. So like arguably, yes. The film could be considered a protest, but calling it a direct protest to like the nuclear tests seems a little too generous.
Gonna derail this. So Godzilla lost its protest.
Yeah, we finished the main film a while ago.
In the years following World War II, this is the total amount of explosive force detonated between the US and the Soviet Union. But when broken down by location, you can see that 87% of this explosive force took place right here. So many bombs were dropped here, including one named Castle Bravo, which was literally 1,000 times more powerful than the one dropped on Hiroshima. There's no way we can fathom this really, but we can sort of try to do a thought exercise to understand how powerful these bombs are. If you detonated this here in Washington, D.C., 90% of the population of D.C. and Baltimore and Philadelphia and New York would disappear in just 3 days. Okay, so unsurprisingly, back in Bikini, the locals never got to go back. That was never the intention. It was all a lie. As much of a lie as the propaganda film itself. Even if they did go back, it would be a death sentence. A recent study found that this group of islands is more radioactive than the Chernobyl exclusion zone. But guess what? No one cared. No one cares. When told about this radioactivity in the Pacific, Secretary of State Henry Kissinger said, and I quote, "There are only 90,000 of them out there. Who gives a damn?" What an asshole. So this story explains how we got the name for the swimsuit, the bikini, why SpongeBob lives where he lives, and why we use the word bomb as a compliment. But it also teaches us a deeper lesson about what lengths we will go to retain power, or as some frame it, to maintain peace. That's a complicated paradox to untangle, especially when this peace that we're talking about relies on potential of absolute destruction. The race to build and test these nuclear weapons led to the US not taking the risk on their own soil, instead doing what we've done so expertly for many, many decades, exporting that risk and those consequences to faraway places, to places where we can manipulate and lie to the people, and then pollute their oceans forever.
That's fun. So why were people calling you an incel is because I don't like red tubers. So yeah. What I'm thinking too is there a common misconception when it comes to Godzilla with all these essays? Generally, at least the commonalities that you see with these is that Godzilla was either like a direct response or a protest of or condemnation of the US, when in the book and the movie they directly state that Godzilla is very much an unintended consequence of the bomb, so they try not to like drum up direct animosity towards the US in that aspect. Also, there's usually a general understanding that Godzilla King of the Monsters is a film that tarnished the original or is completely a waste of time because of removing elements, which are usually just the two elements that people think of, those being the heartbreaking scene with the mother and her kids and the scene on the train with Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Those are the two that are always brought up and say that because of that, the meaning of the original is completely lost. Oh, and the removal of Yamane's speech at the end of it. So that's usually why a lot of people will say King of the Monsters is bad, but they'll also say that the film directly shows just how terrible and awful the US is. All the US want to do is commit war crimes, things of that nature. I think probably what I would want to do is that down the line in the future, maybe during the summer, I'm going to want to do a series of streams where we do a little bit more research or pull from several books talking about the atomic bomb in more detail. I know definitely I want to do a thing defending King of the Monsters. I don't necessarily think it's better than the original, but I think people just rag on it because they want to rag on it instead of actually really going into too much detail about things. But yeah, so what's interesting is that we went through a whole lot of videos today without actually going too far over the mark. Like we did not do a long man today, and I'm thinking I may want to do open up the stream, but I think probably I might end the stream in just a little bit. But thanks for the insight. By the way, do you have any thoughts about EFAP's breakdown of -1? Yeah, it's pretty good. There's nothing too wrong with it. There's like only a few small things, and there's like a few common misconceptions about -1 too. Like for some reason, everyone assumes that the Godzilla on Odo Island is a baby and that he gets to become an adult, and that's what you see in Ginza. That's like one of the few common misconceptions we see, or the fact that Tachibana installed an ejector seat when in reality the ejector seat was already there in the film. So it's small things like that. But yeah, the EFAP one was not too bad either. Yeah, like it's one of those things where I'm like, I would want to keep going, but there isn't really too much to say, unfortunately. I would have wanted to do some gameplay of Excidio and show that off on stream, but that completely tanked the earlier part of the stream, unfortunately. So we will not be able to do that, sadly. I don't know anyone could watch a full EFAP, but you gotta do it like how I do it, which is where you watch the watching EFAP stream on like 2x speed. That's how you get to do it. But I'm thinking, why not? We can open up the stream at least for a little bit. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put the link to the StreamYard in the Discord, and if you're in the Discord, you can join it. And if you aren't in the Discord, I'm gonna send the link out to the Discord for people to join it that way, so that you can become a part of the community. The Boogie one was nuts. I don't think I have watched the Boogie one, interestingly enough. I didn't really care too much about Boogie 2988, so I was like, okay, cool, I guess. But they're literally, because of how many streams EFAP has done and how long they are, I'm always gonna have a backlog of EFAP content, and it's stuff I'm probably never gonna be able to get through, but it is what it is. Thanks for the ride. I'll be heading out. Thank you for joining, Martin. Yeah. Right there, if you want to join, there's the link to the Discord right there, which I appreciate. Anyone for joining if they want to come in. But now we wait. I know. Actually, what I'm gonna do is I can actually bring up a guy's channel, it's a Power Scales channel that I think is actually pretty good. He just released a video right now too, which I'm probably gonna watch after the stream dies down. So while I go look for that, and I wait for people to join in the back. Videos there. Sec. Let me share screen. I really just go to appreciate the offer though. Yeah, no, it's no problem. Goji Chronic. Goji Chronic does good stuff. What do you think will win, the ants from the movie Them, or the giant ant from the movie, or the giant spider from the movie Spider? I have not seen the movie Spider in a long time, and probably off the top of my head, I would just assume the ants from Them. How is it going, the sea monsters?
Doing pretty well.
Are you proud of me that I was able to get through so many videos without making it like 2 hours long and doing a giant
I kind of wonder, like, I was kind of wondering about that. Like, did you finish, whether or not you even finished the video, and you just kind of went off and did anything else but finish it?
No, literally, like, because that video had so little to do with Godzilla, and it tangented off like 3-4 times, I was like, okay.
Yeah, that was a very interesting video when you, I mean, in the ironic sense of the word.
Yeah.
It's like, like when you pretty much kind of like break it down, it's like you can understand, you can hear what he's saying, and in some roundabout way, in like when he's talking about like meaninglessness and what have you, and how how unnecessary something like killing Godzilla kind of was, like it's hard to really describe it. It's like in a sense you could maybe, like, if you squint sideways, maybe you could see where the connections are, but it really kind of seemed like he just wanted to talk about a whole bunch, like, considering how much he goes into like stuff like that movie, I'm thinking of Ending Things. It just makes you wonder, why not just make a video about that instead of like making it like a segment in a video that's supposed to be about Godzilla? and try to
Exactly.
like morph something around that.
1 second. He says the falling out of monstrosities a bit. Like, it just goes to show that like that's what you get when you have a diversity of thought in a group. Nothing wrong with that. I wish
Yeah.
I was able to come on for all of Matt's streams and stuff, but sometimes he does them super late, so I'm like, I'm so tired, I cannot do this. But it is what it is. Yeah. What did he mean by we must destroy what the bomb cannot? Like, we can go back to it, but like honestly, I don't even think he answers it himself.
Yeah, it kind of comes off as like one of those like types of projects, like not just like a video, but just like any project in general that's like seems like that tries to make it seem like it's saying something and it's trying to ask the audience, but it's like also asking the audience, what do you think it means? Like, where are we going with this? But really, it just seems like it seems like someone who just wanted to like make a video where he just kind of talked
about other films that had to either do with fascism or Nazis or like identity, things like that. But let's go here at least.
Yeah, like
this moment, we come to realize that none of it was about us. He never wanted to menace anyone. He's an animal. This is what he sounds like. To kill Godzilla is
wow.
Godzilla dies, he lets out one of his iconic screams. But here, it feels different somehow. Before, Godzilla's noise was terrifying, inhuman. Now, in this moment, we come to realize that none of it was about us. He never wanted to menace anyone.
It's interesting because, again, in the movie, you see the shot of Emiko screaming as Godzilla kind of lunges forward, whereas in the book, it's explicitly showing Godzilla trying to directly kill Emiko. And then, of course, Godzilla's attack on Tokyo and the attacks on the ships means he explicitly was definitely trying to kill us.
Yeah.
He's an animal. This is what he sounds like. To kill Godzilla is far worse than whatever Godzilla could have done. It required starving the ocean itself of oxygen.
Yeah,
Godzilla
that's not accurate. And yeah, if Godzilla had continued, he probably would have kept on expanding his territory.
1954 was, in no small part, a response to nuclear testing, compromising the fishing yields in Japan's oceans. That is why he emerges, after all. There are no fish left for him to eat. And so it's striking that in order to finally kill him, they must finish the job, make the ocean barren. Godzilla is so big that to end him is to end life itself.
Also not true.
Another real scene. He gives his speech, and then Godzilla wrecks Tokyo, and we never hear him talk about not killing Godzilla again. He doesn't come around. He doesn't change his mind in some emotional moment. There's simply an absence there. It's as though Yamane can't, the film can't, acknowledge what it's doing, what it's saying to us. Godzilla meant everything, but that's kind of the problem. In the end, we must destroy what the bomb cannot.
Like, essentially, I guess what you could say is that, like, what he means by that is like through our actions we have to actually like finish the job, and like us finishing a job is like so terrible, but like by doing that you won't realize that Godzilla is actually the victim. It's like that, okay, I guess. But like you come to that conclusion that yeah, it's true, Godzilla is also a victim of the atomic bombs, but like he also is still an aggressive monster that was actively going out of his way to sink ships and kill people. So it's not as cut and dry as he's trying to make it out to be.
And you can't in the context of the story, like the characters like can't even be for certain like whether or not he's just gonna like leave them or anyone else alone like after Tokyo, pretty much. So that's why they just went out and killed him. So
yeah, but it was also the fact that like they were trying to ensure that Godzilla wasn't gonna come back and do exactly what he had already done before.
Yeah, to anyone else potentially, or to them again. So.
Mm-hmm. You know, Joe Schmoes says about what the fuck does that even mean? Yeah,
that's a good question.
That's a very good question.
Answer the question. You win $100 Sonic gift card. I don't know.
I wish. I like considering how many Sonic ads I get, I could totally go for some Sonic.
Yeah.
But yeah, like it's just so interesting to always see like the same issues pop up when like people who aren't fans bring up Godzilla, because it's always like it always seems to be framed from, oh, the American just wanted to commit a war crime, and yeah, the Japanese were totally innocent. They weren't doing anything at all. Or as we just found out recently, that the Japanese, in the Japanese version of this film, actually were the ones doing nuclear testing that brought Godzilla to the surface.
Oh God, classic.
That's always funny. That will never not stop being funny.
That's yeah. Yeah.
Give me that Sonic gift card. Yeah, what's it called? I'll grift for Sonic.
Yeah.
But yeah, like honestly, Sea Monsters, in your opinion, what is like some of the worst things to where it comes to like Godzilla stuff that you see online that isn't produced by like fans?
Oh, I don't usually tend to go out of my way to seek out that kind of
Fair
stuff.
enough.
It would usually just kind of come up. It would usually be something that would just come up pretty much. Like
Yeah,
Godzilla, ironically, I mean, with something like Dr. Skipper, pretty much, or us stumbling upon that one video talking about how Godzilla was created by the Japanese nuclear tests. Like stuff that you just stumble upon almost, or yeah. It's kind of hard to really say.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, like, there's such a backlog of like Godzilla -1 videos that probably are saying all the exact same things that I could go through. And like, it would literally just be me not saying anything, listening to these, because they'd all be like, well, Godzilla -1 is breaking records. It's doing it on such a small budget. It's a monster movie that cares. And it's sort of like, honestly, I'd rather just see a deluge of those than deal with some of the videos that I've seen recently, because they're trying to say something, but they're failing all the way as they do it, or just having a bunch of like weird false information that doesn't help their points.
Right. I will say there is like something. I actually do have something. It was something that I didn't stumble upon, on my own terms. Pretty much, it was just kind of like something that like the audio viewer covered. Like, what was that? Like that list of creatures that are stronger than Godzilla, pretty much. That was
That article.
Like what is this? Like the xenomorphs from the Alien franchise, because of the fact that they have numbers on their side, they could take Godzilla down. It's like, what? It's like, yeah, they may have acid for blood and it would still hurt Godzilla, but he'd still be able to trounce them. And he wouldn't even need to do that. He could just nuke them pretty much.
It's sort of like you need to have a Godzilla fan on site to do some of these videos, some of those articles, because they're just so bad.
Yeah, and like they pretty much say that Ghidorah breathes fire, as opposed to just saying, like, they can't even just say like lightning, pretty much, because at least gravity beams look like lightning, pretty much.
Yeah.
But the real killer is like when they have to make a correction on like Gauss, when they say like, yeah, he is from, technically he's from Gamera, but he would still technically, something stupid like where they just still try to qualify it, about why Gauss would still count as a Godzilla villain, or something like that. It's so dumb. It's like, I don't even know, like. Or the graboids from Tremors. What was it? Like, I don't even know if they even included the Cloverfield monster on that list. I can't remember, but
let's actually, why not? Let me see in the last couple of minutes if I can find that article.
Yeah.
10 monsters. It's like 10 monsters that can beat Godzilla, right?
Something like that. Or like I think they even changed the title for it, retroact. They edited the title so it wouldn't say stronger than Godzilla.
Wait.
I wouldn't be surprised if they took it down because they felt ashamed for making it.
What's it called? I don't think this is the right one. So wait a second.
It
Yeah, this
came out
isn't the
around
same one, but I
20
found
It came out around
this one.
2019.
This one's even worse. Wow. So
Dude.
this one's by Comic Book Resources.
Oh, okay. Let's.
So we'll end off the stream with this because this is bad. So 10 movie monsters that could defeat Godzilla and 10 that don't stand a chance. Let's see. Well, what's it called? Looks like did they do a video as well for this?
Oh.
Ugh.
Oh God, I would feel gross even giving them a view.
Yeah. I suffer for you guys. This is what I do. I suffer for the art. Up. Oh no.
Oh no. Kraken from Pirates of the Caribbean. Is that like something that could defeat Godzilla?
Wait, yeah, he literally was like, wait, let's go back. Because he's like,
wait a minute.
Yeah, no, he did. I know I should not press the button.
No!
Again.
No!
I was like,
bear with us, folks.
This is what I deal with.
Yeah. Yeah, now it's just playing like a different video entirely.
That's not even the same video.
What? You might want to have to refresh the page, actually. Or even go
we'll
down.
Just do it from the article itself. Nah, just go through the article.
Yeah, let's just do it.
Let's see. There are certain movie monsters who would handily defeat Godzilla. The Kraken.
Yeah,
Kraken
no.
From Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yeah, no way. No friggin' way.
No.
Kong could defeat him.
While Godzilla's gigantic, the Kraken may have him beat. The most famous way someone defeated the Kraken was by forcing like a Medusa's head that's turning into stone are far too large to move. So it would come down to a hand fight, which guy would likely win. What? What are you talking about?
That's not even the correct image.
They're using two different Krakens. What? Okay.
Well, even then, neither one of them could defeat Godzilla. Like, come on.
The old gods are too gargantuan even for the king of the monsters. In Hellboy, Russian mystic Rasputin attempts to open a doorway on Earth to deep space. This plans to free the old gods, also known as Oder Jihad, which are enormous entities inspired by Jacob Lovecraft. Despite entities, these creatures are so much that they're saying induce madness in humans. Conversely, plenty of people gaze upon Godzilla remain this.
Are they referencing the creatures that were almost let out in the first Hellboy? The first.
It's one from 2004.
Okay. I mean, they don't. I think they only showed like one in that movie, which is like the one with the tentacles, I think. But
yeah,
I mean, considering that, I guess they probably. It's been a while since I've even seen that movie, but
yeah, maybe.
You know, but they're. I mean, theoretically, maybe,
you get one CBR. You get one. Pennywise would pose a unique threat to Godzilla. Let's see how. Wait,
Good
so
question.
unfortunately for Godzilla, Pennywise is hard to kill. It can change shape and seemingly alter reality. Pennywise seems to be the ability to overcome fear, which would be an issue. He probably lacks the mental capacity to understand what Pennywise isn't truly overcome its powers. Well, Godzilla's just not afraid. Godzilla just squares up with everyone. So
Godzilla has no fear, pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
What the fuck?
Could possess Godzilla without him knowing.
What?
The Deadites.
No, someone would have to die or have something like go in or have something happen to them, like a bite or even like something like go in there. Like even then the Deadite rules are kind of like all over the place in the franchise. So
wait, these fixes are deform stop on killing whatever. While an individual day, like when posed the demons that spawn them would eventually the demons that spawn them definitely would. It's difficult for anyone, even Godzilla, to fight a disembodied evil force. This fight would probably result in Godzilla could possess, which would be terrible news for everyone else. Possibly.
Unless
but if Godzilla
Unless
Godzilla destroys it, yeah. Godzilla destroys it.
Or if Godzilla gets raped by a giant tree, then maybe.
Yeah, I don't think so.
But that's never gonna happen.
The Blob could simply envelop and ingest Godzilla.
Again, he could still nuke it with atomic breath unless the Blob has like has nuclear proof abilities. I don't even. Again, long while since I've even seen any.
Yeah, I
blob.
think Godzilla would literally just atomize it. So
Yeah. Okay. All
Oh,
right.
they're literally just saying that the Kaiju Pacific Rim win just because of sheer numbers. It's like, what's it called? If we're actually, ironically enough, if Godzilla guy did a short about whether or not like what category Godzilla would be in the Pacific Rim universe, and based on like his radioactivity and his size, he would actually be like a really significantly high level Pacific Rim kaiju. So that's not happening.
Yeah, he'd be able to take it on.
The Thing could infect and control the King of the Monsters.
No.
Well, considering Godzilla's like change in biology, like unless we're gonna say that like Orga, the Thing could do it, but we're not sure if the Thing could overcome the radiation.
No, it would not.
Probably not. No. Predators have the equipment to take down almost any being, including Godzilla. No.
No, they would not.
No. Not even their ships couldn't. No.
Oh, what is that?
Slithers, slugs are too small for Godzilla to pin down. They'd probably I think they died from an explosion. So like inside his body, they probably heat up and die. So no.
I've never even seen Slithers, so I wouldn't even.
I haven't seen it either.
Stay puft, Marshmallow Man.
It's practically invincible. Why is that?
What?
So, as he survives immolation, he's only defeated when the Ghostbusters team cross their streams in reverse flow. The portal goes right.
They're still able to singe him, and they have like proton packs that are basically like small nuclear things.
Yeah, more than likely, like the power that Godzilla possesses would be enough to just literally Godzilla atomizes most of these monsters. Medusa could defeat Godzilla with a single luck. Possibly, yeah.
I mean, that's the only one. That's the only one that.
I know there are some cases of Godzilla's being immune to magic, so Godzilla could possibly overpower Medusa.
Yeah, but I mean, if we just stick with like a traditional sort of Godzilla sort of thing, or at least like as traditional, like not GMK perhaps, but kind of like your typical Godzilla, because Godzilla is usually not supernatural. So I mean, okay, Medusa from Clash of Titans, fair enough. I mean,
or what's it called? Like it takes a little bit of time for Medusa to like activate her powers. So it's possible for Medusa to win, but like also Godzilla could just blast her real quick and she's gone.
Yeah, he could just or he could just smash her with her tail casually.
Is far greater than that of Godzilla. I've forgotten about Middle Earth. Bog is even more powerful than Smog. Even Godzilla's saying. Honestly, no. I think Godzilla could beat most of the Balrogs, at least like their physical forms on Middle Earth, especially how they could in like the Peter Jackson versions.
Yeah, if pretty much a wizard could defeat a Balrog by just granted that's magic pretty much, and
but also like Gandalf is the equivalent of like an angel in the world of Middle Earth. So like you're talking about like a divine versus demonic being, but like in terms of just sheer power, the Balrogs were still, I think, less powerful than something like Glaurung, which I think Glaurung's closer in size to something like Godzilla. So I'd probably say Godzilla could beat a Balrog.
I'm mainly just familiar with like the Peter Jackson stuff, so so what you're just referencing there.
We'll end it off and see monsters who Godzilla could beat in a fight. They say the Xenomorphs, at least in this article, the Xenomorph loses. Okay,
at least they got that right.
That's easy. Pumpkinhead would be his match. Let's see. Person can temporarily halt Pumpkinhead and never entirely destroy it. These features would undoubtedly make a fight between Pumpkinhead. Demon isn't just smiley, so you can figure out how to hurt God. So like almost all the mini-sized monsters, like it would be hard, but like Godzilla's still gonna take down Pumpkinhead. Leprechaun's magic would likely be enough to oppose Godzilla's strength. But wait, Medusa has magic, so why are they saying that the Leprechaun here wouldn't win? But okay.
I don't know. And considering how often he keeps coming back, he's like a slasher villain. He's a slasher villain. He could just always find a way to come back somehow.
Yeah, the Quiet Place aliens are allergic to sound, so that goes without saying. The Wolfman. Well, Godzilla fought the Wolfman, so we already know Godzilla could win this fight. Frankenstein's monster would pose an underwhelming threat to Godzilla. Hey, we know Frankenstein can beat Baragon, and Godzilla beats Baragon, so there you go.
Well, here's the thing: the fact that the Frankenstein monster kind of could derive his power from electricity, like King Kong did. So it would, I would say, and if you made him like kaiju sized, like I could see the Frankenstein monster being enough, definitely giving Godzilla like a lot more trouble for sure. But
well, like the 62 Godzilla, but like the 54 one or post 62, not really. But yeah, they do a bunch of like the Universal monsters too, because they do Creature from the Black Lagoon, like that's easy dub. They do the shark from Jaws, because they don't do it like any actually like big monsters. Sully Mike, okay.
What?
The rabbit of Chernobog is mighty.
we know the rabbit could just take anything on easily.
And the Sarlacc, okay, yeah, the Sarlacc isn't gonna win either.
I mean,
that was bad.
Wow. Yeah, that was
at least,
that was
like, they didn't even do anything that was at least kind of fun. That was disappointing. I want my money back. I want the money back from the ads that you placed in front of me.
I want you to refund the people whom you did the ads, who let you do ads for.
Exactly, yeah. But that's all, guys. And then remember, if you see someone who doesn't do Godzilla content normally, they probably are going to have a pretty normie take, or they're going to have a terrible one like Big Joel's, because don't do a Big Joel, guys, because if you just want to talk about film about Nazis and stuff, then just do that. Don't try to bake it on Godzilla. But you all know where to find us. You know where Sea Monster is. You know where I am. This has been Zimzilla, and I will see you guys next time. Have a good one, gentlemen.